Start streaming, yeah.
It says end stream. It looks like it's spinning.
It's okay. We don't want to try to end it. That's the problem, because then we'll just need to make a new one. And I mean, I can make another one really quickly, but let's just see if it's live. I'm still looking.
Okay, I'm refreshing on my iPad to check too.
Hold on, Kate.
See, I don't even see afternoon.
Okay, I will make a new one and go and push end stream on that one.
Okay. I'm sorry, Elaine.
No, you're fine. Oh, yeah, no, you're fine. It's okay. It happens. Trust me. And I'm sorry to the team, but
it's okay. It says on the YouTube channel right now live, but it says morning of November 11th.
Right. We've got, okay. All right. Let's see. I'm going to create it. And so, Rebecca, you're going to go in and then see. Oh, it says private. Hold on. Let's go. Public. Publish. Okay. So did you see the afternoon one?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, so click on that.
Get the new key.
Okay. Then you should get a go live. It should be the same key. You should get a go live in a second. It does take a second sometimes, so it should be.
Yeah, I had it set up at like noon before. My anxiety is so high right now. It's just spinning.
Well, we appreciate you, Rebecca, so no worries.
I like hardwired into my internet too, because I was like, I need all the internet. Oh, she's doing something. And she kicked me out.
Oh no, hold on. You're good. Oh, you're live. Yay, you did it.
I did? I didn't press go live.
It's working.
Okay.
Whatever it is, it's working.
Okay, cool. Well, hi everyone. I don't know if you can see me or my screen, but we're gonna start over for today. We're gonna quickly go through. I think you can see me now. We had some technical difficulties, but we're back. I'm Rebecca Reynolds with the Digital Innovation Team, and I'm joined with a few lovely ladies, and I'm gonna put their presentation up so they can just quickly say their name and go through. So welcome, ladies. Thank you so much. And I'm going to share my screen and get that going, and let me know if we are still live. There we go.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start us off. I'm Sam Bennett. I'm a Zone 1 math coach, and I'm so excited to be here with you today with this amazing team of coaches and teachers.
Hi, I am Amber Wise. I am the academic instructional coach at Smyrna Elementary.
Hi, I'm Ashley Pearson. I teach 3rd grade at Okolona Elementary.
Hi, my name is Kelly Conkling, and I teach 4th grade at Hartstern Elementary.
Hi, my name is Amanda Wooten, and I teach 3rd grade at Bates Elementary.
Awesome. So if you wouldn't mind hitting the next slide for me, Becca. These wonderful math leaders are going to be talking to you all about in-the-moment student-centered feedback today. NTI has offered so many challenges, and this group of teachers and coaches have broken barriers to implementing effective and efficient feedback to increase student learning. And you're going to have an opportunity to learn today about synchronous and asynchronous strategies with various platforms for not only teacher to student feedback, but peer-to-peer feedback as well. And I don't want to take any more time from these brilliant leaders. So if you would like to know more about feedback from the elementary math team, please visit the curriculum frameworks by clicking on the curriculum framework link. And look at the tools section, the tasks, and the games. You can also reach out to Elizabeth, Andrea, Amy, and myself. We're always here to support you and your students. So to begin talking about feedback today, we're going to switch over to Amber to start us off.
All right, so most of our feedback at Smyrna is given in synchronous instruction, from observing our students showing their work, using manipulatives, talk moves, and most importantly, justifying their answers through discourse. So one of our biggest challenges in NTI, as I'm sure it's yours, is just simply not having enough time with our students. And one thing that happened because of this was a lot of the formative assessments that we would have done in the brick and mortar classroom with our students has been pushed to that asynchronous work time. And in our primary grades, we are having lots of parent support during those asynchronous lessons. And in our intermediate grades, a lot of the work just simply isn't getting done if it's not done synchronously. So to fix this problem, or because of that, we weren't getting a valid picture really of what our students know or needed to know to push that learning forward. So we were able to fix it by our teachers actually volunteering to add an additional whole group time to their day. And through that whole group time, we're able to teach a mini lesson, and then they have their small group times where they are able to get in their math focus groups, or maybe they're doing the formative assessment there, or maybe they're playing workplace games or centers, where we're getting to see exactly what our students know and what they don't know. And this has greatly impacted our ability to give feedback that's really moving the learning forward. Another struggle that we had when NTI started was simply not being able to see our kids. So what we did was, a lot of our teachers have two monitors, one monitor where they are sharing their screen, and then one monitor where they are simply just monitoring the kids. So we call it our kind of proximity control monitor. We might be looking to see what are they doing with their manipulatives, because every kid at Smyrna was sent home with the manipulative kit. Or maybe they're just watching the students show their work on a piece of paper. In our younger grades, you can see in the top right-hand corner, they're answering a question using their fingers. But the important thing is that we can see what every kid is doing in the moment. We can give them feedback right then and there, and then the teacher can structure the discourse around what they're seeing. What efficient strategies do they want shared? So we're going to watch a video from a kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Haskins, who's doing just that.
Emily, how many wheels do we have?
6.
6. Very good. How did you get 6? What did you do to figure that out?
I counted them.
Oh, you counted them? Okay, that's one way you could figure it out. So look, we have 2, 4, 6. Did anybody do something different? Did anybody not count? Sophia, I think you did something different because I saw what you were doing with your fingers. What did you do?
Well, I was counting the wheels. I knew that 3 plus 3 equals 6. But I wanted to make sure it was 6 because there were 3 wheels with 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 bikes.
Very good. Okay, so that's another.
So in the video, what you didn't see was that later on in the lesson, students began using Sophia's strategy of doubling. So Ms. Haskins was able to see that by Sophia using her hand motions to answer the question, she was able to focus that discourse around the more efficient strategy. And as the lesson went on, other students then picked up on that strategy of doubling. So in the next slide, you're going to see a picture down at the bottom where you'll see 2 students using talk moves. And requiring students to use talk moves allows us to get a bigger picture of what the class as a whole knows instead of just what the speaker knows. So it gives the speaker in the moment feedback as well. Are their peers agreeing with them? Are they respectfully disagreeing? Are they wanting to add on? And then it also gives the teacher an idea of where she needs to take the discussion and really provides that feedback that's going to move the learning forward. Students understand things so much easier sometimes when it comes from a peer. So we're going to watch another video where you will see and really hear feedback from a peer. You're going to see their talk move, and you're going to hear one peer teaching a strategy to another.
I agree.
Okay. Give me some more feedback for Jericho.
I agree.
Okay, so talk to me now, Jericho, about your strategy. How did you set this up? How did you go from there?
I put it in I'm bad at explaining things.
No, you're great at it. Let's hear it.
So, I did 9 plus 7 is 6. 16. I was looking at it wrong. 9 plus 7 equals 16, and I added the 10 on 9 plus 5, which equals 15. Then I did 1 plus 1 plus 1, and I got $3, and I got $3.56 in total.
Okay. So here's what I wrote down, okay? Because this is what you told me. Now, and I'm not doing this to knock it or anything, Jericho, because you do have the right answer. But
That
Jericho, because it looks crazy, doesn't it? So here's the thing. We were talking before you logged on, and it's just because you came on a little bit late this morning, okay, about a new strategy called a give and a take. So we're going to take from one and give to the other. So can somebody talk to me and talk to Jericho about our new give and take strategy?
So give and take is like taking away from the second number and giving it to take away 7 from here and then give it to the 99 so it can be like $2. And that would be a 56.
Okay, I love it, Nicholas. So we don't want to take necessarily all 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would we take away from here to get to here?
You just take away 1.
Yeah, so we're just going to take away 1 penny, right? So if I say minus 1 penny, and over here I'm going to give it to this guy over here, okay? So Jericho, that's going to make this number a nice even $2. How do you feel about that?
Rebecca, you can go ahead and stop it if you want.
Sure.
Okay. And then,
we had some great comments from Andrea in the chat talking about how Miss Geary over here is talking about strategies and thinking, and she loves that.
Great. So what you didn't see when the video finishes up is Nicholas finishes walking Jericho through that new strategy that they learned, and then Jericho is able to finish working out that problem on his own. I think the most important takeaway from that video is that Mrs. Geary did not let that student give up. As soon as he started explaining in the beginning, he wanted to give up, but she didn't let him. And I think right now, more than anything, we need to not be letting our students give up. Because of time management, we want to stop and we want to move on, but right now we can't. We have to show them that with feedback, they can do this and that we believe in them. So next, we're going to hear from Ashley.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ashley. I teach 3rd grade at Okolona Elementary, best school ever. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is giving teacher to student feedback and student to student feedback through the use of a platform called Nearpod. There may be some of you who currently use that or you've heard about it. If you've never dived into it, it is an incredible resource. And one thing I always tell people is it's like getting a new cell phone. The first time you get it, it looks a little confusing and a little bit overwhelming. But as you play with it, you discover really neat tools and really neat opportunities to increase student achievement. So it's basically just a platform that I create my lessons in. And what is really, really neat about it and has helped my students excel this year is that I can see all of my students all 23 of them working at the same time on one screen. I can see all of them working, drawing a line at the same time. I can see what they're typing, and it is just a really neat way to physically have eyes on every single kid. So this is an example on this slide that you can see, and it's only, I snipped it, so it's only 9 students, but you can see they're in the middle of working out a multiplication problem. So I can see them all working at the same time, and what this allows me to do is it allows me to immediately clear up any sort of misunderstandings that those students might have. And I can even click on those images and expand them and make them larger to get a clearer look. And sometimes a student is making some sort of creation and I have no idea what they're talking about. So that's the opportunity where I can say, hey, so-and-so, can you unmute yourself and explain a little bit further? And a lot of times that clears things up. And what that has allowed my students to do as a class, other kids will start unmuting and saying, oh yeah, I was thinking the same thing, or I agree, or I'd like to add on to. So it's given me a really cool way for me to clear up misunderstandings with my students, but also for my other students to give feedback to each other. There is a paid version and a free version of Nearpod. I currently use the paid version, but the free version uses lets you access most of the same resources. So if you want to dive into it and explore it a little bit further in your own time, it is a really cool resource and you don't need to pay for the full edition. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're going to watch a quick video. It's about a minute long, and this is just one of my lessons where I was able to snip and clip some of that feedback that I was able to give students.
Let me read the problem again. It says, there are 4 boxes of crayons at my house. There are 10 crayons in each box. Marisol, look at that again. We're creating equal groups. Look at how many groups you have and how many are in. Calvin, on yours, you have equal groups. You have 4 groups, but then you have 10 in one and then 20 in another. So you're saying there's 10 crayons in one box and 20 crayons in another box and 30 crayons in another box and 40 crayons in another box? There's only 10 in each box. All right, Bryson Wilhite, you have 4 groups with 4 dots. So your picture shows 4 boxes of crayons with 4 crayons in each box. There's supposed to be 10 crayons in each box, Bryson Wilhite. So look at that again. Nevaeh, you're drawing both of them, it looks like. Good, Amari, that's beautiful. Joanna, it looks like you've got the right idea. Cadence, you've got the right idea. Bryson Ritter, you just drew 4 lines. That doesn't make sense. You need to redo that. Good, Calvin. Brooklyn, you're on the right track. Good. That's a great group right there. Now keep going. Good, Laura.
Okay, so that was just a little bit. Oh, I'll wait for you to get back. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Just a little bit of the way I'm able to see all of their work. And now in that instance, you didn't see the students responding back to me or responding back to each other, but it's a really nice way to make sure every student is engaged and then also to just clear up again those misunderstandings. What I do love about this program also, or this platform I should say, is I can modify the lessons as I see fit for my students, which I think is essential to giving feedback. Because I'm seeing those students work live, giving feedback so quickly, I can easily assess my students. I can take anecdotal notes really quick and say, so-and-so is not getting at these 5 kids, I need to pull for a group. And that's gonna help me prepare for future lessons. So it's just really important to note that if I see those misunderstandings, I can ask those kids to unmute, share their thinking, and then our kids can interact with each other. So if you've never dived into Nearpod, it is a really cool tool. There are a lot of different things you can do with Nearpod. I'm not going to go through them all, but on this slide, if you go back and watch this later, the hearts are next to the tools that I find really beneficial for student engagement and student feedback, particularly with math. It also works really well for reading and writing, but this is a really neat platform. So I would highly encourage you, if you've never dove into this program, check it out. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, reach out. I would love to get on a live meet with you and just help you work through any sort of kinks that you might have. So we are going to move on to Kelly.
Hello, good afternoon. I wanted to present 2 useful tools of how I provide clear feedback to help students achieve learning goals, both in whole group and in independent assignments in Google Classroom. What I've learned is that feedback, and especially in NTI, can just take many forms, from comments to redirection and also just encouragement. And the most important thing I've learned teaching virtually is that feedback takes place while we're talking with our students, not at our students. And that's the critical difference for me and what makes feedback so valuable. But on this first slide, the first way I integrate feedback is using the website Whiteboard. This platform allows teachers to push out questions or problems to all students, and you can watch them work in real time. And as I watch them, I can provide individual audio feedback as they work, as they're finding solutions to math problems. And I really love watching their thinking in real time, and I can comment on that. So this first clip in the lower right-hand corner is steps to use Whiteboard.
I'm loving these videos, guys. This is awesome.
So if you look, you can create a new class. This is the video. You just type in your name, and then you get this screen. And what you can do is you can toggle your whiteboard. So your whiteboard is at the top, and you can add any type of clip, or not a clip, but a picture of anything. And so I chose to add like a task card for them to work on. And when you put that in there, then you can push it out to all students. Is it showing?
There.
Yeah, there we go. And so then after you push it out to all students, you can scroll down and look at their work. So I want to show how I give feedback in whole group daily math lessons using Whiteboard 5. So the main clip in the middle is me showing how I give feedback in real time for the whole class. So now everyone has their whiteboard with finding the factors. And I'm coming down to see your work right now. I love how Julian is writing his factors. And then he's creating his array. Excellent. Alex, awesome job. He's creating all of his factor pairs first. And then he's drawing his arrays. Nice. Rachel, nice job. I love how you are taking your time to draw your arrays. And Selena's even labeling her arrays with the factors. Wow, that's great. Seems like Mackenzie is putting dots inside. It looks like she's counting to make sure her arrays are correct. I like that strategy. Okay, so you can see that that allowed me to give individual feedback to specific students, but also allow students to hear exemplar examples. So they can have their solutions from hearing me talk directly to individual students. So on the next slide, I integrate feedback into their independent work. So I do both synchronous and asynchronous feedback. I use this Chrome extension called Moat. It's free, but there's also a paid version. I choose to use the free version, and it allows teachers to post audio feedback on slides. So this helps me provide very timely feedback on a daily basis on their work assigned, and then students can respond very positively to that audio feedback by either correcting it, or they're able to take that feedback and apply it as I scaffold concepts within a standard and throughout a string of standards. So the most important takeaway is that they are meeting those learning objectives, not on the formative assessment, but throughout the lessons given. So here's a clip of audio feedback for one of my students' independent assignments in Google Classroom. So for asynchronous work, when students are working by themselves independently, I like to give feedback on their slides through Moat, which is a Chrome extension. It's conveniently located on every single slide that you create, and you can click this button to start recording your audio feedback. So for example, hi Darlene, I wanted to give you some feedback for slide 7. It looks like you left a few factors at the bottom that needed to be placed in the Venn diagram. So some questions you can ask yourself. For example, is 80 divisible by 80? Is 80 divisible by 10? And is 80 divisible by 40? So I want you to think about that so you can select where to place it in your Venn diagram. Okay, so that was an example of comments. I click done.
You want me to stop?
Sure, that'd be great. So basically you can just click done and post, and when you return the work, it's there just like a written comment. And of course, my students are well-versed and have been practicing how to view their work, go back to their missing assignments, etc. So they can hear that feedback, especially if I choose to return it to them before giving them a grade. And I do that a lot so they can correct and learn from their mistakes and grow. So I hope everybody enjoyed those 2 examples of feedback. And now we're going to hear from Amanda.
All right. Hi, I'm Amanda, and I teach 3rd grade at Bates Elementary. Today, I'm going to specifically focus on how I provide meaningful feedback to my students in my math class using Jamboard and Padlet. So I love using Jamboard with my students, but it's especially great for providing feedback to students during live lessons. I use the opportunity to modify my math lessons based on student need. And then I paired Jamboard with Google Breakout Rooms. And this is perfect for giving live feedback to my students in individual settings, in team groups of multiple students, and also for whole class. So I can give feedback to any of those 3 groups in a variety of ways. And then by doing this, by pairing Jamboard with Google Breakout Rooms, students get a unique opportunity to work on math collaboratively while being at home virtual. And so they're working in team-like settings, and I really enjoy listening to students give feedback to one another as they're working collaboratively on a math task. And then I enjoy being present and live in that moment, giving live feedback to them as well. And so I can move the learning forward by providing in the moment feedback to every single group for each lesson. And then I can clear up any misconceptions that pop up during that math lesson. So I'd like to show you a video. The clip is there in the center of how I integrate Jamboard with breakout rooms. One way that I like to provide meaningful in-the-moment feedback using Jamboard is to incorporate the Google Meet breakout rooms. So I have created a class jam, which is a frame for my entire class. I've provided access to each student in the class to this specific frame. So I've also predetermined which students will be in each group for today's activity. So as you can see, for the activity mentioned, I've assigned 3 groups. And so one decision that I made ahead of time during the setup phase is that I decided that students in group 1 will only have access to their group's jam. Students in group 2 and 3, again, will only have access to their group's jam. So this main jam here gives me a place to come back after each group has had a turn to work. It also gives me a place to list the names, so students are aware at every moment who they're working with and what they're responsible for doing. So the way I explain this to my students is they're going to be working on a team activity where they'll be collaborating with each other and providing feedback with one another throughout this activity. So for this math activity, each group was assigned a particular slide with a separate word problem. So the word problems are a little bit differentiated. They're also given a slightly different task. And so group 1 has a particular word problem that they're working on. And so the way that I incorporate Google Meet breakout rooms is, again, before the activity begins, I'll plug in all of the group names for breakout room 1, breakout room 2, and breakout room 3. And students have an understanding that if they're in group 1, they'll go to breakout group 1. Okay, so the group number corresponds with the breakout room number, and it works really well. So the students are used to matching their jam slide with their breakout room number. And that's been working very well. And so one of the reasons that I love incorporating breakout rooms with Jamboard is because students are able to give each other feedback and work collaboratively just as if they were in the classroom, in the building, live in person. And so I found that it's an awesome opportunity for me to chime in with each group and provide live feedback and see how each group is doing with their task at hand. And it's just been really great to be able to monitor the individual breakout rooms and be able to monitor the individual jam slides at the same time. So I'm giving written feedback on the jams. At the same time, I'm providing oral feedback because we're live during the breakout rooms. And so at the very end of projects like this, we'll go back to that class jam and I will present all of the group work. And that gives us a great opportunity for a virtual gallery walk where students can give each other feedback, not just individually and not just within their group, but also to give other groups feedback as well. All right, so that wraps up how I use Jamboard to provide an outlet for students to give one another feedback and for myself to give meaningful feedback to students, both during live lessons and during asynchronous lessons. And so the next slide, I'm going to explain how I use a tool called Padlet to do very similar things. So like Jamboard, Padlet is a great tool to use for math class for a variety of reasons. Students have the opportunity to draw and show their thinking in a variety of ways. They can give audio feedback, video feedback, written, where they can use a doodle tool. And so they're able to give feedback to one another in the same way. So a lot of times the students are giving feedback in written form to one another after they see how each other have solved problems. Padlet makes giving and receiving feedback fun and interactive, and I feel like it's fun for the teacher as well because it's really interactive and the students enjoy seeing that I'm providing feedback in the moment as they're solving their problems. What's great about Padlet though is I can use it right alongside Jamboard and breakout rooms. So it, as a trio, the three tools work really well together. My students have been enjoying using Padlet as a unique way to experience the virtual gallery walks, which I explained a little bit with Jamboard, but through Padlet, that virtual gallery walk looks a little bit different even. So I'd like you to listen. I have 2 student video clips where they provide their perspective as what is it like to give feedback and receive feedback using Padlet and Jamboard. And it's the 2 black dots.
Sorry, which one is it?
Right.
This?
In the top right corner, each black dot is a video.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
No problem.
I like Padlet because it is a great way to share what you think about something with your classmates. So if you agree with someone else's work, there is an add comment button, and if you press that, you can write what you think about what you think of the other person's work. You can also check back on your work to see if anybody else commented. Padlet is a great way to share with your friends.
I like Padlet because you can see your friend's work. You can also comment and like on it. You can make a video, a photo, or you can write something and your classmates and your teacher will see it. When you come back on your Padlet, your teacher and other classmates may have given a comment or a like. And I also like Jamboard because you can work together as a team and do things. You can also edit the things you would like to. Thank you.
All right, so as you can see, the students enjoy that interactive piece. So they have been enjoying the fact that they have placed their math problems in a certain place and they go back and check for that feedback. So it's been really cool to see the students interacting in that way. But in addition, it gives me another outlet of providing meaningful feedback that the students are definitely going back and looking for. So thank you so much for listening to us today. I hope that you've learned a lot about feedback, and please feel free to reach out to any one of us on the math team for more information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies. I'm going to find where you guys are and stop presenting. I know we're a little off on schedule and we've got some of our next friends in here, but thank you so much. You guys had so much love in the chat and on Twitter. I got to kind of sneak some peeks at some of your all's work. So thank you for being here. And bye guys. We're going to skip right into our next episode. We are here with Charlotte and Brandy, and thank you for being so patient. I'm so sorry we're a little off schedule. We had some 2020 tech issues. So I think I see you guys here. If you want to unmute and introduce yourselves, and we can get started. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. In fact, I will go ahead and make sure that our screen is presented and viewable for everyone. So, Brandy, while that is loading, it appears, I will go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
All right, my name is Brandis. Everyone calls me Brandy Robinson. I am part of the 6th grade PLC at Farnsley Middle School. And this is my 17th year teaching middle school English.
And I am Charlotte Humphrey. This is my 2nd year teaching at Farnsley, and this is my 1st year teaching alongside Brandy. And like she said, we are 2/4 or half of the duo of our English PLC in the 6th grade at Farnsley. And today, our presentation is going to be on student-centered practices, and more specifically, ownership and authentic assessment. And so, as you can see by this title slide of our presentation, what you are actually looking at is the first slide that we give our students each week in our interactive journals. And this is what we have been using each week as a way to present not only our activities to our students, but also as a way to deliver assessments and, of course, facilitate ownership and engagement with our students. So what you can see on this slide is, of course, a little bit of our virtual classroom. First and foremost, we, of course, have our whiteboard in the center of the room, and you probably noticed Brandy and I as well, and our Bitmojis here. We use these little emojis as just a way to personalize the work for our students, and also as a way to identify what slides we'll actually be working on them with in class. So they kind of have a dual function as well. But typically on our title slide of our interactive journals, we also have some instructions, typically our reading assignment for the week as well. And as you can see by the bookshelf in the right-hand corner of our digital classroom, our anchor text for this semester has been The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. And so we are actually wrapping that up with our students this week. And Brandy will go more into detail about how we have included that as kind of our anchor for this first semester of virtual NTI. But before we move on, I do want to point out a few more aspects of the title slide to you all. On the left side, you can see our bulletin board does have our theme for today, which is another way that we like to make sure that we're focused on our students and keeping them engaged. And so Brandy and I have also dressed up not only our Bitmojis, but also us today in our sweaters for sweater weather. And this is just something fun that we like to do with the students to keep them engaged and excited to come to our live lessons. So we typically do a theme, whether it may be more of a dress up type activity or even a kind of show and tell. Just depends on the week and is always related back to the novel or whatever we're talking about or the mini lesson we are doing for the week. So just one way that we like to keep things interesting with our students. And there's also other links here on the first slide as well. When the students receive the slideshow for their interactive journal, they are able to access all of the links. And so the digital copy of our novel is linked here for them on the bookshelf, as well as some other fun and useful links. For example, in this slideshow, we do have a link to a YouTube SNL skit that is attached to the computer. So it's a little bit of a scavenger hunt for the students to find what is on the slides each week. Our second slide that we use with our students is, of course, the cover of their interactive journals. And this mimics what a real life lined notebook would look like, as you can see with their name and class section as well, which students are able to edit themselves on their Google slideshows. And you can also see on the right-hand side of the screen, we do have the subtopics of our journal. So for our presentation today, they match the same topics that we will be covering, which will be engaging students, student ownership, authentic assessment, and of course some student samples as well. But typically our students will see these tabs and be able to look at the different sections of their work for the week. And of course, I'm going to go into more detail about how we came up with this idea for our interactive journals, what questions we asked, and a little bit more specifically about the different aspects of the journal. But before we move on, I do want to point out the learning objectives of our presentation today, which are here also. And they are in the same spot where we give them to our students as well. So when our students receive their electronic or interactive journals, their learning objectives are also here on the second slide for them to refer back to throughout the week and for us to refer back to as well before, throughout, and after our lessons. And so our objectives for our presentation today, the first is that I will be able to create assignments that are engaging and allow for student ownership during virtual learning. And the second is that I will be able to create authentic assessments that allow for feedback and progress towards mastery. Now, one more thing I wanted to point out before moving on today is that each of these tabs that represent the subsections of the notebook, when you click on them, will take you to the section of the journal. So, for example, if I was to click the Engaging Students tab here, it will take me to the next slide, which is for Engaging Students. And so while we were planning, we of course wanted to consider engagement as the most important or one of the most important factors for this virtual school year. And so the two questions that we asked ourselves were, how can we engage students authentically? And how we can offer students choice and autonomy in our virtual classroom, because we know that student choice, of course, drives engagement. So Brandy came to me with the idea of using interactive journals as a way to not only mimic the in-class experience of using notebooks in class, but to offer students choice of a variety of both independent and synchronous activities. So throughout the journal, as I've said, there are activities we do with our students in our live lessons, and those are identified by the slides that have our Bitmojis on them and are labeled for the students. But there are also independent tasks that the students are required to do asynchronously as well. So that can include mini projects, vocabulary activities, journal entries, and we do use the same sections for our notebook so that we can be consistent throughout, so our students know what to expect each week with their journal. You may have also noticed I say each week of our journal because we like to use this as our one-stop shop for almost all of our assignments and assessments for each week of the virtual school year. So we also utilize Google Forms for checkpoints and common formative assessments as well, but the bulk of our work with our students is within the interactive journals, and they do receive a new journal each week. And that is because larger Google files and Google slideshows do tend to create lag. So if we were in, of course, the brick and mortar building, we may be using our regular lined notebooks, and students would be able to have that, all of their work in one spot. It's just not as easily able to mimic that journal aspect with having one larger document. So we instead decided to go with a week by week journal and keep them the same throughout. Now, we of course also wanted to focus on student ownership as well, and so students do receive their own copy of their journal each week. And so this is, again, to mimic the individual student work that they revisit throughout the school year and over the course of the weeks as we go forth. And as I said, the larger slideshows are difficult because the file sizes do become a little too large. And so students are offered choice and ability for expression with independent tasks. For example, we've used vocabulary choice boards as a way for students to have options in how they express their understanding of vocabulary words, either with the novel that we're using, The Lightning Thief, or with other texts. We also offer them choice in mini projects, both in the topics of their projects and in the format of those as well. And Brandy will go into more detail with that in just a moment. But we also like to include extension and extra credit opportunities as well within the interactive journals. So those are embedded for our students to explore and take the time to work on independently as well. Brandy, I'm gonna go to you to discuss authentic assessments.
Thank you, Charlotte. So one of the things that we decided to do is, as Charlotte said, is to try to keep everything within the weekly interactive journal so that parents and students alike would not feel like they have to go to multiple platforms or multiple documents to locate their activities for that day. So for authentic assessment, we try to focus each interactive journal on 2 to 3 standards that we put in our objectives page on the cover of the notebook, which is on slide 2, always on slide 2. And then the last page of every journal is our rubric that refers back to those learning targets that we mentioned on slide 2. And we are able to give students timely feedback for that, for students and parents. It's broken down by standard, but also by the slides or assignment tasks, so that they can go back and know that this particular standard is assessed on this particular slide. And then they're able to resubmit the work. If they get back a score that they are not happy with, they're able to resubmit it to show that they are progressing towards mastery. So on the next slide, we're going to show you an example of what that rubric will look like. This is an example rubric from our most recent, or it might be an older one, one of our recent interactive journals. And so you can see that it's standards based, and then it says the standard along with what slides that we are looking at to be able to get that formative assessment. And then students are given a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. If a student makes no attempt on that particular slide, we've had students, I'm sure you know, that will leave slides blank or try to be sneaky and delete them. And so we can put M's in the red box to let them know, hey, we know what you did, you didn't do it. And then what we do is, because Google Slides kind of live in that world of 100 points, in that point world, we align our standards, the standard scale of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 to percentages. So if a student receives a 3 then that is somewhere in the 80 to 89% range. And then what we do is we assess each of the standards, average them together, and give them an overall score out of 100, and return this to them so they can review the rubric, look at areas where maybe they were in the orange or yellow that would like to move towards mastery, and then they could correct and resubmit. And then on the next slide, you'll see how we track those standards over time. So one of the things, and let me just say this, that I am no expert in standards-based grading or anything like that, but I know that as a district, we are kind of trying to move more into that realm, especially in the higher grade levels. And one of the things that we decided to experiment with, we know teaching is a lot of trial and error, is tracking the standards over time. And rather than giving a summative mastery assessment that some students may not complete anyway, we have students that may not participate. Is there a way to track mastery over time? And instead of giving them a score on one assessment, can we say, based on these 3 or 4 tasks, what do we determine as mastery of that standard? So what we do is we track these interactive journals and we track these rubrics over time in a sheet, a Google sheet. And then as you can see by the first student, they received an 85, an 89, and a 75 on 3 separate tasks that were all focused on standard 2 theme. So after 3 data points, I can say with pretty good certainty that student should receive around an 83% overall for the skill of a 6.2 or theme. And then what we do is in our Infinite Campus, we put in the mastery portion, we actually type in mastery of skill 6.2 theme identification or theme development or theme analysis, something along those lines, so that parents understand what that mastery score is for. And we have seen pretty good success with this. As you can see, I have some M's. So there are some students that are not participating. And so for those students, I give them a score of incomplete for that mastery assessment until I'm able to get some data points for that term. All right, moving on to the next slide. We're going to show you some student samples of what we have in our interactive journal work. The first example is our Olympian travel guide, which was a larger scale project that we did right before our Thanksgiving break. Percy's pottery, one of the first mini projects that we came up with in the beginning of the novel. And then the last project, A Hero's Defense, which students are finishing up this week. For the travel guide project, what we did is we were focusing a lot on character traits, character perspective, character motivation. And so what they did is they had to create a travel guide for one of the main 3 heroes, Percy, Annabeth, or Grover. And they would choose 3 destinations in the United States that they felt like that character would really enjoy visiting. And they were to make a brochure, a slideshow, or even a video where they were to pretend to be like the travel channel anchor talking about their great places to visit. So as you can see on the next slide, this is an example of one of my students using an interactive slideshow, because one of the things that we asked them to do is use an interactive slideshow rather than just a typical regular presentation. So they had to provide links on their slideshow to show that they knew how to do that. So this is an example of where Percy would probably like to visit from one of my students. And it's you can see some links that he provided to an aquarium restaurant, which I didn't even know existed. So that's really interesting. And he had some pictures and described what was so intriguing about these locations and why Percy would really enjoy visiting them. And students were given, because of this opportunity, they were given choice. They were given a chance to choose the character that maybe they identified best with. And they got a choice in how they would like to present their information. And we had a lot of good work come from that. The next sample is the Percy pottery. And what we did was in the beginning, the first 7 or 8 chapters of the book, the character Percy Jackson, we find out he was a demigod, but we weren't for sure who his Olympian parent was until chapter 8. We called it the big reveal chapter. So what we did is we had them practice the skill of where an author would foreshadow or imply or hint at future events. So they were to go back and find 3 scenes in which the author recorded hinted that Percy's Olympian parent was Poseidon. Then they filled out the graphic organizer, and then they were able to create an end product, which is on slide 12, the next slide. So you'll see there's a graphic organizer that is filled out by a student of mine. There's scene 1, scene 2, and scene 3. And then they were to pick a scene and actually design an ancient Greek pot or plate. So you can see at the top row, you've got that orange one is the what we call the toilet bowl scene, where he makes toilet water explode onto Clarice. Same scene for the middle pot. And then the last one right under the tab is the scene from the first chapter where he makes a girl go into the fountain. And you can see in the graphic organizer, that's scene 1 that someone pointed out, that Percy pushes Nancy into the water, and kids who saw it said it looked like the water grabbed her. The bottom plate is the big reveal moment where the water was able to heal Percy. Then they take all of that they've created and turn it into a paragraph. We've been using the acronym TEA. We thought the kids would get a kick out of spilling the tea. And TEA stands for Topic Evidence Analysis. So they have a topic sentence, their evidence, and then they kind of break down the analysis of the evidence and why it supports that topic. So you can see a student example here. The author gave us a hint of who Percy's dad was when Percy said he felt tired when he came out of the water and was being healed while in the creek. I know this because in the story in chapter 8, he says, and then they have their quote. And that is kind of what we've been practicing with that. The next slide talks about our final project, which we have named the Hero's Defense. And this week they're going to be doing a writing portion and an art portion again. They are defending the claim Percy was a true hero and Percy was not a true hero. So we had them defend 2 separate claims to get them used to seeing both sides of an argument. So we brainstormed first what makes someone heroic, what makes them not heroic. And then, as you can see on the next slide, we had another graphic organizer shaped like a shield, where they found scenes from the story where Percy did not behave like a true hero, and then times that Percy did, in fact. So they actually put in textual evidence. We taught them how to use parenthetical citations, and then they turned it into 2 argument paragraphs. As you can see right here, it says, "Now spill the tea. Percy Jackson was a true hero." So they started off with Percy acted like a true hero because he was selfless, putting other people ahead of what he wanted. I know this because of his actions in chapter 13. In chapter 13, Percy jumped off the arch thinking, if he dies, at least this monster will leave my friends and the tourists alone. And then you can see the parenthetical citation. And you notice the highlights. I've been training my students to highlight the topic, the evidence analysis, to make sure they have all 3 components. And then the art portion is where they get to design a shield. I showed them some ancient Roman and Greek shields that had engraved battle scenes on them. And I said that was a way to kind of instill fear and celebrate victories. So a little social studies content there as well. And then they had to create their own. So on the very last slide, these are a few examples that I was able to find. As I said, they're technically not due until the end of the week. So I only have a few examples to show you. We have one where I chose to draw the scene where Percy acted like a true hero when he saved all his friends and himself to keep everyone safe instead of his mother. So if you've read the story, this is where he uses the pearls and they float in those are bubbles. They float in those bubbles to the surface. Then the one underneath that is the Medusa scene. This is where Percy does not act like a true hero. It was suggested that he behead Medusa, and Annabeth tells him to do that, and his response is, "What, are you crazy? Let's get out of here." And the kids remembered that doesn't seem very heroic. So that is the scene that student drew. And then my favorite one is the Minotaur one right here, right next to the tab. I chose to draw the scene where Percy fights the Minotaur on page 41 because Sally told Percy to leave her and Grover behind, they would be fine. She said to go to the camp where the Minotaur can't get him. Percy told his mom no and said that her and Grover are coming with him. Percy could have listened, saving himself and leaving his mom and Grover as the Minotaur's lunch. And so I love the student voice in that explanation as to why this is a scene of Percy acting like a true hero. So I want to say before we take questions and answers is that I will say we are by no means experts. I feel like teaching is a lot of trial and error, and there's a lot of things that we're still experimenting with, especially when it comes to mastery and standards-based grading and things like that. But Charlotte and I hope that our presentation lets you walk away with maybe a spark of inspiration or a practical application.
Charlotte sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Rebecca. I just wanted to say thank you both for doing this. This is beautiful work, and you are experts, and this is just excellent. And also wanted to let you know a certain Trenton Malone, who I believe is a student of yours, was in your in the chat giving you all props. And so hopefully that will warm your hearts and fill your cup before this holiday season. He said you are excellent teachers.
Thank you. I love Trenton. He's so sweet.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So you guys got a great shout out. And we also had Shannon join us and say that you guys are fantastic leaders at Farnsley. And I totally agree. My eyes were just like watching large on my iPad over here with everything you shared. So impressed. So this episode is going to be on demand later today or tomorrow as I break those apart. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining us, and we'll see you next time, hopefully.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye. All right. We have up next, I know Jordan is here waiting. I'm going to close some of these tabs really quick. Be careful. So we're going to check our schedule. I'm Rebecca Reynolds with the Digital Innovation channel, and I'm a Digital Innovation leader. But right now we have live feedback with Jordan Stout, and normally I would go check on Twitter and talk about our hashtag, but we are a little behind schedule, and I'm very sorry about that. So Jordan, thank you so much for being patient and waiting. Are you ready to go?
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, so I've actually never used Google Hang. Oh, here it is. I was gonna say, how do I share my screen?
Yeah, there's a little snowman up in the right corner.
Okay, let's see.
And I love your background. It's very cozy. Team Avengers, yes.
Okay. Here.
Perfect. We can see everything. And then you'll just press that CC button to turn those on. It's on that black bar. And you got it. You're good to go.
All right, great. So, hello, my name is Jordan Stout. I'm a 7th grade ELA teacher at Johnson Traditional Middle School. Now, I'm going to be talking about specifically student-centered learning practices and authentic assessments. So we know that student learning occurs when meaningful connections are made, but how do we foster that, right? How do we get students to take ownership over their learning? Well, first, we can make the content rigorous enough that it requires them to engage with it. So middle schoolers especially, and even in 7th grade, right? I have 12 and 13-year-olds, and if what I'm presenting to them is not intriguing or difficult enough that they don't have to devote their full attention to it, they're gone. So making the content rigorous so that they have to pay attention or they'll miss something is a great way to really keep them engaged. Also, to provide students with a variety of experiences that allow the opportunity for those connections to be made. So maybe a student doesn't respond really well when I ask them to unmute themselves and share their thinking, but they're comfortable to respond in the chat. Or they're comfortable putting in a private message on Google Classroom. So allowing students multiple ways to share their learning is also important. And also the opportunities come with varying types of assessments, which I'll get to shortly. And then finally, hold them accountable. So this is really important, especially in an NTI environment. I know that a lot of people talk about, well, I don't know how to grade them because, every student situation is different. And when I say hold them accountable, I'm not necessarily talking about their grades. I'm also talking about how we communicate with them that we are not going to let them fall through the cracks, right? So I'll talk about more specific ways to do this in just a moment. So the steps I have taken to encourage students to take ownership over their learning, The main thing is I make my digital classroom procedures and class structure as close to as possible as I would do if we were in person. So it presents a structure that is probably familiar to them, right? They probably did something similar in 6th grade. And then when we are to go back in person, the transition will be as jarring because they will have already set up these expectations for them. So I include a digital notebook, kind of similar to the group that was just before me, but I use Google Slides and I create a digital notebook, and I'll show you an example of it in just a moment. And this is the way I assess students during live instruction, because a lot of times I will give them work time, or while they're working on their warm-up or they're completing a specific assignment, I'll be scrolling through on my iPad looking at these Google Slides and giving them feedback based on what I'm seeing in real time. I also give work time, like I said, during live instruction. This allows for me to do those quick formative assessments and correct their direction if they're going in the wrong way. And it also keeps them engaged, right? So if I'm teaching them about theme and then they're doing an assignment on theme, right, there's the connect is easier. Whereas if I were to give a whole lesson on theme and then the next day ask them to do the assignment, or say this afternoon whenever you have work time complete the assignment, there's a greater chance that some of that learning will have gone one ear and out the other. I also make the content and assignments rigorous enough that they must pay attention. With that being said, while I want to be cognizant of the varying situations that each of our students have in their home lives, I also want to challenge them, right? I want to push their thinking. And while all of my assignments are organized and are clear enough that if a student misses a live class, or if they aren't able to devote their full attention to me during a live instruction, that they can still complete it. But if they are able to watch me and listen to me as I give instruction, paying attention will make their assignments so much easier. Also allow student choice. So student choice is really important when getting students to take ownership, because especially with middle school and 12 and 13-year-olds and how they are trying to find themselves and establish independence, they feel like they are being talked to a lot and being told what to do. And by allowing them to have choice, they're saying, okay, I made this decision, this is my work. And it really, really helps when they're taking that ownership. And then finally, hold students accountable for attendance and class participation. So this is where I was talking about the accountability piece, and why it's not necessarily focused on grades. Yes, grades are important. They show mastery. This is also making a student aware that I am not going to let you slide. I'm not going to let you hide in the background. And I hold students accountable in my class by making them aware that I'm not going to ignore them. So for example, I allow the first 5 minutes of my classes for our warm-up, and our warm-up is in our notebook. And so while students are working on their warm-up during that 5 minutes, I'm scrolling the entire time and looking at each person's notebook. And I give live feedback, like, Tommy, I really like how you wrote in complete sentences. Or, Jamal, I really wish that you would capitalize your I's when you are writing, something like that. And then if my feedback isn't something that I want to say out loud in front of everyone, in fear of it might make that student feel embarrassed, I'll comment it in the private message portion on Google Classroom. So I might say, like, hey, I noticed you haven't started your warm-up, let's get started. Or, I know you're not really focusing on this right now, what's going on? Or if they're not in class, maybe, because again, this is in the first 5 minutes, I'll comment and say, we're really missing you in class today. And by doing that, if they're at home and they see on their phone or their computer, they get that notification that I've commented, I know they're not in class. A lot of times I'll get students to join then, right? They're like, oh, she knows I'm not paying attention, or I'm not there, and then they'll join. So it kind of catches those students and lets them know, I'm not going to let you slide here. I know you're not here. I acknowledge when you are. And then also communicating with parents. when students aren't in class. And a lot of times if students aren't, they may have a valid reason, right? I have a student who every morning rides with her mom to work, so she can't, during my class time, she can't complete her warm-up in the first 5 minutes because she's in the car and she's tuning in on her phone. And so she knows, and I know, that during that time she's still present, she's still listening, but she'll get it when she gets to her mom's work, right? And so that communication piece is important, not only to validate the experience of the student, but to also hold them accountable, like I was saying. So ownership and authentic assessment, I use the student notebook, and I'm going to show you an example of mine in just a second. I use the hands up, hands down feature in Google Meet. Again, offering that other option, right? They may not feel comfortable unmuting themselves. They may not feel comfortable responding in the chat, but if I say, show me your hand if you agree with this statement, right? I might get some more participation that way. I use varied types of assessments. Sometimes I'll do quick Google forms just to check, okay, do they understand the basic elements of this standard? Or I'll do longer assessments that might be more creative, or a variation where an assessment might have a short little, did they get the main points at the top, and then at the end it's asking them to elaborate and take that next step. I also allow students to remediate assignments, and this is really big, especially with standards-based grading. I tell students all the time, I said, you can do assignment within a grading period as many times as you need to prove mastery, and I'll grade it as many times as you need, but I want to see that you're making progress. So I never want a student to get discouraged about their grade on an assignment, because I want them to know this is where you're at, but this isn't where you have to stay. And that idea of taking ownership, right? Just because you got a 5 out of 10 on this assignment doesn't mean that you can't work to show mastery, maybe get an 8 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 on this assignment. And then finally, holding students accountable, like I've mentioned several times, but during when I'm assessing them, addressing them by name, right? Commenting on their assignment. And when students hear their name, especially even as adults, like if you're in a faculty meeting or some type of training and you hear your name called, they're like, oh, I need to pay attention, right? Students are the same way. So when I address them by name, I acknowledge, hey, I see your contribution, or you may not be paying attention, so let's bring it back. And then giving that live feedback. I've seen the most success, like I said, with the live feedback. So planning, when I'm planning a lesson where I'm trying to get students to take ownership and to really assess them authentically, I reflect on what has worked and has not worked in the past, specifically with different groups of kids. I also ask myself, does the question and prompts presented offer a variety of demonstrations of learning? So, for example, can I assess them, like can they identify, right, really quickly? Can they create something based on that standard? Does it offer them, an ability to elaborate on their thinking? Maybe they can't get there in 1 to 2 words, but they could get there if they could explain their train of thought. I also, I ask myself when I'm planning, could someone who was not present during live instruction complete this successfully? This is an important question because ultimately we want students to be in live instruction, but we don't want students to feel discouraged if they're not. They go to try to complete the assignment, they're like, oh, it's over my head, I'm frustrated, I'm just not going to do it. So when I'm creating assessments and assignments, I structure it so that it is clear enough that they should be able to understand what it's asking them to do, but perhaps they want to reach out to me to get further clarification on what that standard is. So, for example, we're reading A Christmas Carol right now, and we just did something on theme. So I may ask them to identify a theme in the Christmas Carol and then analyze its development throughout the play. So they know what it's asking of them. They've probably heard of the Christmas Carol. They probably read it if they were following along with us in class, but maybe they're stuck on what theme is. So this assignment doesn't seem overly overwhelming or out of the blue to them, they may just need that extra help. So they may comment on Google Classroom, Ms. Dowd, I can't remember what theme is, or can I come to your office hour so we can talk about what theme is? And so that's what I really try to focus on is, yes, I want them to be able to complete it if they were in class, because every student has different circumstances. But I want them to have to reach out to me or to hear that instruction to take that final step. And then finally is what I'm asking them to do, standards-based. This is an example of my notebooks. This is the front page of the notebook. Students like to get creative. This was week 10, so this was around Halloween, and put stickers on it. Sometimes they'll put their own stickers on it. Sometimes I'll put stickers on it just to be fun. And then, so this is what it would look like, and I kind of blocked out because this was a student's notebook, so I blocked out her name, but this is what it would look like to them. So they see it as a Google slide, and then there's the rubric on the right side, and then where it says private comments over here is where I'm commenting during class. This is where I would say, hey, why aren't you working on your warm-up, or let's get started, or I noticed you haven't started working on slide 7, and that's what we're working on right now. What's going on? Or if they have written something and I want to write a more specific comment, I would highlight and then use the comment feature that is circled here. So all of this is a way to give students that live feedback and redirect them if they need that redirection immediately, but then also offer praise. This, I might also say, I love that you've written incomplete sentences, or you have a really good start, keep it up. My students know that from the beginning of class to the end of class, I will have seen each of their notebooks by the end. So maybe in the 5 minutes in the warm-up, I only get to the first 6 or 7 students, but they know that by the end of the class, I will have looked at their notebook, and they know that I'm going to be commenting. So it's also that accountability measure, right? They know, oh, she's going to look at it, but I don't know when, so I need to be following along. So this is an example of something I might have in the warm-up. You can kind of see that I have highlighted the boxes in yellow, and also there's like a yellow kind of tab at the right side of the page. And this lets students know I need to do something on this page. So we were working around Halloween on some argument writing, and we had done some Think Circus, and my students were kind of struggling with the platform, but Think Circa really has some great things that I've been kind of borrowing and implementing them in my own way. And so this is kind of what this notebook was, is we were doing some Think Circa lessons in our notebook. That way that students didn't get lost in the platform until we could learn it. Because again, this was back around Halloween. So the students would read this short little passage, and I tried to make it interesting. So this one was about video games, and then I might ask them to, well, in this specific one, I asked them to find the reasoning that supports the claim and evidence that I gave them, and then find the counter argument. So I might, on a different day, I might give them, we hadn't gotten to audience yet, so we just have the circ part of Circa, but I might give them the reasoning and the counterclaim, and I'll have them come up with the evidence and the claim. So this was an example of a warm-up we might have in our notebook. This is an actual student response, so you can see how this student, we've been working on sentence stem, so I was proud of her. She said, therefore, this shows, and on the other hand, so this is a response that a student put in their notebook for this week. I also will use the notebook as additional notes. Sometimes I don't always require them to write anything on a specific page. That's why I had the yellow tab on the warm-up. This is purely an informational slide. So we were getting ready to talk about audience, so you can see this is something I stole from Think Circa. And then I also, in addition to having writing prompts in their notebooks, I'll provide some low-stake things as well. This is another activity that I borrowed from Think Circa, and they can actually move those blue dots to indicate their answer. So again, providing that varying opportunities for students to demonstrate their learning, right? So if maybe a student's at home and their siblings are running around, or it's really loud and they can't focus to type out a response, but they can read a sentence and then identify the appropriate audience by moving a little circle. It's another way for me to quickly assess their understanding. is another example that I borrowed from Think Circa. And then finally, communication is key, especially with parents and guardians, but as well as students. So if a student has missed both days, so at Johnson, we're on a block, so I'll see my first, second, and third periods Mondays and Wednesdays, my fourth, 5th, and 6th on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if a student misses both days during the week and have not been to my office hours, because I have office hours outside of class time where they can come in and receive additional help, on Thursday I'll contact home and invite the student to small group on Friday, and then on Friday I'll connect again with the parent or guardian about whether or not the student attended small group. So again, it's that accountability, letting them know that I'm not going to forget you, I'm not going to let you slide, I care about your learning. And then if they see that I care, it's going to make them more apt to care as well. And then communicating with students is also important. I strongly utilize the private comment feature in Google Classroom to check in with students, especially if what I want to know or what I want to say isn't something that I want to say in front of the whole class because I don't want to embarrass the student, or it just doesn't pertain to the whole class. Then I'll use that as a way to communicate with them, and students love to use that as well because it's quick. They get a notification on their phone, I get a notification on my phone, and we can stay in communication. So that is what I have for you guys on ways to help students take ownership of their learning and demonstrate that authentic assessment through live feedback, and trying to create a classroom that is most authentic as possible and like our in-person learning.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I really love the variety that you gave for student feedback. I know there's so many different types of student learners, and it's changed so much when we're virtual. So it's really great that you're adapting to every single learner, and I think that's so important. You did have some love from your school on Twitter. They already retweeted a tweet that we put out and said, that's our own Miss Stout. So they were so excited that you're representing the school and doing a great job.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
All right, we are actually on time. I'm so excited. I'm Rebecca Reynolds. I'm with the Digital Innovation Team, and we're going to take 1 second. I know Vincent is here and ready to just check out our schedule. So we've got some changes. He's going to be taking over for Daria, I'm guessing, and then we're going to be playing a video for that, and then we should be on time for the rest of the day for our last 2 sessions. So we're going to check back in with him, and we're ready to go.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Vincent Tinker. I'm the K-12 literacy coach for social studies. And if you don't mind, I will be sharing my screen.
Sounds good.
So today we're going to be looking at our virtual learning, and it's going to be teachers on inquiry and authentic assessment. What you're going to be able to witness, Rebecca, thank you for the great introduction, because what you're going to be able to witness is a conversation between Ryan New and Daria. Daria's a first-year teacher figuring out inquiry, and it's going to be a really interesting conversation about how she frames inquiry, how she focuses on her supporting questions and discusses sources with students, and ultimately is looking at that authentic assessment using our single-point scaffolded rubric. And that is going to be the second half of this presentation. To give you some context of what they're talking about using that authentic assessment, I'll begin us off with looking at the rubric that they're going to be referencing, so you have a greater understanding of how they're talking about it and the discussions that they're having using that specific rubric. And that's what I'll begin us with here.
Perfect.
And what you're looking at here on the right side is our single page rubric. We fit everything on one page. We have several other documents that explain it and go in more detail, but ultimately our rubric is on a single page. It is our formative performance task, which means these are the kind of tasks that we would be using for assessments in a given lesson, which would be our supporting questions that you're trying to answer. It looks like there's a lot on this page, and I'll do my best to break it down in a quick fashion, but earlier today, we actually recorded a longer video on the rubric. If you're interested in watching that, that will also be on the digital learning channel for us here. This will just be a quick look so you have a reference on the discussion that we are going to watch here in a little bit. First off, the rubric is divided into two sections. The first section is the formative performance task, in which we will scaffold out our different tasks. And then the second part is the assessment criteria. And that is mainly the component that they're going to be referencing today. She's going to be referencing Scaffold 1 and Scaffold 2, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But even though it looks like there's a lot on this page, there's really just two sections. You're choosing your task, and then you're choosing which aspects of the assessment criteria you're going to assess on that given lesson. So this is just the top portion of our rubric. And what you see here is an annotated version of that, which we have an annotated version on our website, which is jcpssocialstudies.com. And I'm going to click through so you can kind of see some of the aspects that they'll be referencing. Again, this is a formative performance task, which means it is what you're using to assess supporting questions that are scaffolding up to the compelling question, which would then be completed with a summative performance task, which is kind of the task that you'd be using at the end of the entire unit. Up here, it is also scaffolded. You kind of see our traditional and social studies staircase that we have. So you're building up those skills. And we also have really brief instructions for the students and the teachers. Again, you are picking your task, and then you're choosing which type of criteria you are assessing on that given task. What I'd like to spend just a little bit more time talking about is the types of tasks that we offer. These are coming directly from our state assessments. Our assessments have lots of different action verbs in them, but a handful of them are assessments that you could actually use as tasks. And we use that through description, generalization, explanation, and claim, because the ultimate goal in social studies is doing argumentation and action. And our belief is you can't do argumentation unless you scaffold backwards and backwards plan those skills that they need. So in order to do an argument is a series of claims. You have to obviously be able to do a claim. And we argue before you can do a claim, you would need to be able to do an explanation. Before you do an explanation, you would need to be able to do a generalization, which is like a summary or a main idea. And before you can do summaries, you would need to be able to describe something. This language can be found in our standards, except for generalization, which we added in as a natural step in our scaffold between description and explanations. Even the language that you see here is rooted in our using evidence standards and our communicating conclusion standards. So what you'll see is we pulled the language of the standards the best that we could into our definitions. And the whole goal of this is to have common definitions for these tasks. That way you can bring equity for our students as they switch from teachers, maybe going from 6th grade to 7th grade or 7th grade to 8th grade. You can have one definition within a department that you can vertically align on about what an explanation means, what a claim means, and you have language that's rooted in the standards that can help create that language for the conversations that we have in our discipline. If you notice, we also have criteria scaffolds also here. This is the assessment criteria, just in number form. The rest of it will be on the next slide, which is the bottom part of our rubric that they will mainly be referencing in the video that you're going to watch. What we have here is options on how to scaffold even the assessment criteria. So if you're doing a description, you could either do 1 or 2. A 1 or 2 for us in our criteria is accurate and clear. It doesn't have a 3 and a 4, which is evidenced and reasoned. So we're saying if you're going to do a description, you would want to focus on being accurate and clear. Now, we give a couple options, as you can see here on our slide, on how you could approach that. You could give the entire class the same description, and they're all doing a description for their task, and you could say everybody's doing a number 1, which is being accurate, and they could all work on being accurate as they do a description. You could also mix this up. Maybe certain classes have different levels of students, that some are still working on just being accurate, but other students are in that same class are ready to work on being clear. So you can have some students being accurate, you can have some students being accurate and clear. And you can also even mix it up and say, look, we are all going to do accurate and clear, but maybe I'm going to assess only on being clear in one circumstance. So we try to provide a lot of flexibility within this. And just as we scaffold our criteria, you can also scaffold your task. So as you're looking at this, you can have some students doing a description and other students that are ready for it doing a generalization. They're all being assessed on the same rubric. They're all being assessed on the same criteria, unless you choose to vary up the criteria for a student. It provides a lot of options for scaffolding for our students. The second part that you're going to hear about today is the criteria, and that's where they're going to be spending most of their time, because they will be focusing on doing a claim in their class. And in the video, you're going to watch them talk mainly about being accurate and clear. I just want to point out a few things about that so you have an understanding going into that great discussion that you're going to witness. So first off, we talked about the criteria scaffold. This is a 1, 2, 3, and 4, going from accurate, clear, evidence, and reason. And then we have the criteria for the single point. And the idea of a single point rubric is, instead of having a traditional 4-point rubric where it's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the goal has always been typically a 3, which is being proficient, we provided the language of the goal being proficient. This is the language that we want them to be able to achieve in the assessment criteria. And we purposely cut out the 2s, the 1s, and the 4s to create this need on making the proficient level. And we moved toward a single point rubric with detractors and enhancers. So we are arguing that they're either, in their writing, they can be either detracting from that writing. So if you look at clear, you're going to hear a conversation about how they talk about clear. And they have writing that can be clear at one time and writing that can be not clear at a given time. So you can put in specific notes about how some of the writing is detracting from being clear, but they can also have ways in the same writing piece in which they are really enhancing that clarity. And you can give kudos to the students in the right column about how they're being clear. That way you're drawing their attention to that and you try to have them replicate that in future writing. This hopefully tries to bring some equity. So instead of just circling a 2 or 3 or 4 on a 4-point rubric, you're actually able to say, this is how you're achieving the proficient level and how you're not achieving the proficient level, with giving really specific targeted feedback for those students. Again, we have a video that goes a little bit more into this, also on the Learning Channel. The last point I'd like to make is that we have hyperlinked terms, because the language matters so much in rubrics and it matters so much for students and teachers. This creates language in which students can use in class. If you're looking at, let's say, in our criteria evidenced, it says corroborated, weighed, and cited. You could start having students use this language in how they talk about sources and how they talk about their evidence. And so they're bringing that disciplinary language into the class because it's brought into the rubric. And these are things that teachers in their PLCs can now have discussions about how students are corroborating and weighed, because those are the things that matter to our discipline. So that is just a quick look at our scaffolded rubric. So it gives you some context for that video. At this time, I believe our host will be able to play that interview with our teacher, Daria, and Ryan New, who is our instructional lead for social studies.
I'm going to try to find it. I'm glad I got that little review. I know that we've had you guys on so many times, but it was good to get that review again. And I think it must be this 2 o'clock video. Is that them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's nice to have a little review because we can't guarantee people watch maybe other videos in our series. So that's just hopefully just a quick look for a base understanding of the conversation we're going to hear.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Vincent. I guess you're going to go, or are you going to stay in the chat?
I'll stay in the chat and to do a little conclusion if you'd like at the end.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to press play. You might not be able to see it, but it's on the channel.
I'm the instructional lead at Jefferson County Public Schools. Today we're going to be looking at, during our virtual learning series on the Digital Learning Channel, looking at teachers with inquiry and authentic assessment. And we're joined today by a fantastic teacher, Daria. Daria, welcome.
Thank you, Ryan. I deeply appreciate it. So I'm Daria Oshinkowski, Miss O. I teach at Newburgh Middle School. I teach 6th grade social studies. Super excited to be here.
Excellent. And I understand this is like year 1 for you, right?
Yeah. I'm just finishing my first year, and I would say I taught a total of 12 weeks inside the classroom, and then I went virtual.
Well, that's pretty amazing then to have your first year be all virtual and still be able to do the type of stuff that you're doing. You're going to show us today. So do you mind to walk us through, before we look at, we're really going to be looking at assessment today. We're going to be looking at rubrics and the use of rubrics, being able to give authentic feedback to authentic assessments. So do you mind just sort of walk us through very quickly the lesson that you did with your students?
Absolutely. So as we look here, the compelling question for our unit is, how did power shape civilizations? And from the get-go, I'm pretty excited about this unit, right? Power's fun. Kids like to talk about power. Kids like to see who has power, who doesn't have power. And so our supporting question we're looking at today is going to be, how did the geography of Egypt and Mesopotamia influence government? And so this one I thought was going to be fun anyway, to try to get kids thinking in different ways. And so we started off with, where have we been? What have we looked at? And so we've looked at where we see power in our world today, and we've looked at the social structures in Egypt and Mesopotamia. So then, who holds the power? Who doesn't hold the power? And I love that, one, because it's so prevalent in our world today. And two, we get to come back to that notion, that idea again and again in this unit. And so then, where are we going? So we're going to continue to see that power and power imbalances is everywhere. And then we're going to look at how geography of Egypt and Mesopotamia created the need for government. And then later on, we're going to look at different people who held power. So come with me. I always tell my kids, let's go exploring. We're on a journey. We're going to discover some cool stuff. So let's keep rolling. So here you're going to see the sources that I gave the kids. What you're looking at is exactly what my kids are looking at. So source A is just two maps, trying to highlight the physical features of Egypt and Mesopotamia. I wanted them to see how the river allowed for trade, which then allowed the need of government. So then we go to source B, and we're looking at an excerpt from a ReadWorks passage, and we're looking at just a quick quote, and really focusing on that second half. So I think the kids are able to see where the river is providing the crops, right? And we've talked about technology in the ancient civilizations. And so now we're entering into a different phase and talking about trade and the need for government. Okay, so source C, I wanted the kids to focus on seeing the desert as a natural barrier, how that physical feature created and influence the government that would come about. And I want them to focus on the invading foreign armies. So then I tried to, throughout the lesson, connect back to what do we see our government doing today? And so that was the frame of mind that I was trying to get my kids into. And then again, as we ended today's lesson to today's supporting question with answering, how did the geography of Egypt and Mesopotamia influence government?
Excellent, Derry. Thank you so much, right? And so once you're able to go through this lesson, at the end of this, students are writing claims. They're going to be writing claims that are going to address the supporting question, okay? So during that time, you've been working with your students about a rubric. The rubric here is a scaffolded single-point rubric that looks at 4 major criteria. Those criteria are accurate, is it clear, evidenced, and is it reasoned? And we see that on either side of the criteria, 2 places in order to give pointed, authentic student feedback. It's going to be directed at the types of things that we want students to focus in on so they can move from this lesson to the next one, building their skills as they move along. We see on the left side, these are detractors. These are things that are taking away from what their claim or their explanation might be. And on the right side, we see enhancers, things that students did so well that we want to call attention and celebrate their success to get them to continuously do that type of high-level work. Today, Daria, my understanding is that you, because this is a scaffolded rubric, you don't have to do all the criteria together. Daria, why did you choose to look at just accuracy and just evidence for this lesson?
So to toot my own horn, I thought the sources were pretty decent, and so I really do want my kids to learn how to pull out evidence, and they are continually having trouble with that, which is okay. They're only 11, right? And I think accuracy is a great way to build their confidence, and I love that that's the first tier of the scaffolded rubric, because you can say, hey, yeah, your information's accurate, check mark, and that gives kids some confidence. So then we can go down to another criteria and say, okay, let's, either, hey, great job on the evidence, I love that you were able to pull that out, or this is where we can work on.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you saying is that, man, accuracy is a good beginning place for students to be able to get some of that confidence move forward, because we're about to bash them, right? Not bash them, but about to really critique them on the evidence. Is that right?
Yep.
And here's claim number 1. Okay. Remember the formative performance task. Write a claim answering the supporting question, how did geography influence Egyptian and Mesopotamian governments, looking specifically at evidence and accuracy?
Geography influences government because source A, Egypt and Mesopotamia, influenced the government by trading goods. This evidence supports my answer because in source A, it talks about trading and honesty.
Okay, excellent. And this is, by the way, exactly as it was typed out, right, with punctuation and everything. And we know that probably that's the first thing that's sort of screaming. Why is trading capitalized? Where are the periods, right? What's going on here? But that's not necessarily what we're really focusing on, right? That can come later. That's the easy part. But what we really want students to focus on is it accurate? Is it evidence? And then we can give some feedback later on about some of the grammar and syntax. So let's take a look then at the rubric for claim number 1. Tell us a little bit about the feedback that you left for the student.
So the information is accurate. They're able to communicate. They're able to communicate. We're talking about Egypt and Mesopotamia. We're talking about how the geography influenced government. They're able to restate the question. That's great. They can talk about trading goods. I thought that was good. And so, again, info is accurate. And then the evidence, they aren't able to pull out anything directly, and it's not. When I read this, one of my initial thoughts was, I'm not getting any idea of what source A is. And so I, as a reader, cannot tell how the source is connecting from, trading to government, or geography to trading to government. I cannot see that as a reader, and that's not communicated in their claim. So that's where that's detracting from their writing.
Excellent. Yeah, no, this is good feedback to be able to give exactly to a student who's trying to figure this out, right? So you've actually quoted sort of the student here, right, about what they're doing, and then it's really about so they've cited some of the evidence, but they haven't really pulled out, right, the key parts of that evidence to include. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And they don't say, hey, in source A of the maps, that would have given me at least a little bit more of I know what we're looking at.
Okay, excellent. Okay, let's take then a look at claim number 2. So again, we're looking at the formative performance task. Write a claim answering the supporting question, how did geography influence Egyptian and Mesopotamian governments, looking again at evidence and accuracy?
Okay. The geography of Egypt and Mesopotamia influence government because in source C, the quote, the dangerous desert acts as a protection source for Egypt, and that caused the creation of armies. Government giving protection, source C states, this proves that the geography of Egypt and Mesopotamia influence government. Now, again, we're only looking at the accuracy and the evidence.
Okay, so let's take a look at what you were able to give some feedback here.
Again, their information is accurate. They're able to identify the desert and as it acted as protection, and their understanding of the source was good, and they're able to communicate that as well in their claim. So as well as their evidence, right? And so both of these are going to go in the enhancers, where I put the accurate and the evidence in the enhancers. And not that it's, I guess that's a back and forth and that's on my own learning, but it's not bad per se. They are able to use actual evidence. They are quoting from the source here. And so that is what I'm trying to get kids to understand and do. And he does a good job of pulling out evidence from the source. And that's all we're looking at. We're not looking at the reasoning or anything more deeper.
That's right. We got to remind our listeners that this is for a 6th grade student, right? So this student is 11 years old, and they're trying to figure out how to use evidence, maybe for the first time, right? And so being able to give them some of the early wins, right, by saying, "Look, you quoted here, dangerous desert. I want to continue to see that." That's what that enhancer side is all about, right? It's that positive reinforcement of being able to give very pointed feedback of saying, "Look, how you're quoting this matters." And something else, Gary, that you did here that I think is so great is not only are you talking about the evidence, but you're actually combining it with the accuracy above, right? So not only is it accurate in its information, but it's accurate in its quotation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's take a look then at the third claim. Again, the formative performance task, write a claim answering the supporting question. How did geography influence Egyptian and Mesopotamian governments?
The geography of Egypt and Mesopotamia influenced government because of the trade routes due to the river. According to the Reading Works passage, it states trade generated income to the cities along the river. This source says that the trade routes are important for the civilizations, and the government had to make sure the trades was being controlled in the city. As we look at the rubric again, only looking at accurate and evidence, the student is accurate. The student does a good job of pulling out evidence and using the source correctly and interpreting the source correctly. And so again, A+ on that. As we move down and we look at the evidence, he also does a good job. He pulls a direct quote from the source. And so that trade generated income to the cities along the river. And so that's great. That's what we wanted. That's what I want the students to be able to do. And then he's able, as a reader, I am able to see how physical geography, trade, government, it's almost a thread, right? And we see that in his claim here. And so again, that's going to enhance his writing, and that's important and for where we're going in the future.
Yeah, and not only that, but part of the evidence criteria, right, is about corroborating. And I think you've done a really good job of explaining exactly what the student did in that claim, of corroborating source A, B, and C together in order to formulate their idea. I think that part of what makes an authentic assessment is, and this is something I thought about in my own classroom, is if a student's able to come in and answer all the questions that we pose for the day or complete all the tasks without ever actually having to go through the classroom, or they could do this with the computer, then my job was a poor job that day, right? Your students would not be able to write a claim back with evidence without having looked at these sources. Do you agree with that?
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that means then the question becomes not whether they can do it, but what degree can they do it? How well can they do it? And that's exactly what, a good authentic assessment, right? Making argument in social studies, that's what we're all about, but also how do you improve the quality of that? And that's where these, this rubric, this scaffolded rubric comes in. And can you tell us a little bit about the idea of how this sort of frees up your thinking of feedback to students, right? This idea of a scaffolded rubric where you don't have to hit all the criteria together, that you can sort of pick and choose those different elements.
It can give kids the confidence that they need to move forward, and knowing that as well as their teacher's going to be right there with them, right? I'm not going to, obviously they're doing the work on their own, but I am going to make sure as I'm giving feedback and looking to help them improve, I'm right there, and we have a rubric that's also going to help guide them right through. And they know exactly what they need to be doing, right? I think it's so hard when and giving feedback can be so subjective. Like, one teacher's going to say this and one teacher's going to say this. Well, we have a rubric that says, hey, 4 points, and here's what it looks like. And so I think it's a great way to get students just on that path of writing, and slowly, hopefully, also love writing in the process.
Well, if you have any questions, you can reach out to the district team, or you can reach out to Daria, Miss O, on your own to sort of talk about this. But Daria, I appreciate, through our conversation, I never would have thought, if you would have told me that this Friday was going to be your technically 1 year of teaching, right? Even though we're midway through the year, right? We started last spring. This is fantastic feedback to be able to provide during this time. You're doing social studies well.
All right, everyone. So that is the end of their session. That's awesome for a first-year teacher from Newburgh to be here on the channel for the first time. So kudos to her. Up next, and I'm checking the chat. I don't think there were any questions for them. We had Rebecca Ingram in the chat, though, helping out her team. So I think we have some videos next for 2:30. We are on time. We have about 2 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and get a chance to check on our hashtag. If you haven't followed our account, be sure to check out our account at JCPS Diggin. And right when you get there, you can quickly click that hashtag, and I like to go to latest and just kind of see what's going on. So we've got someone who is sharing out a Jamboard that they work together. We love sharing is caring over here. And then we had Courtney, who tuned in earlier to watch her Farnsley friends present. Their session was super popular, and we loved their sweaters. We obviously had our good friends with social study on just now, and their their episode will be on demand. Hopefully I can get that done later today or tomorrow to be able to put that on our channel. And it looks like we've just got everything going on right there with what's been going on the channel today. So up next, we have Student Voice Choice in Agency and Visual Arts with Samantha Brooks. And then right after that, it's another pre-recorded video for Empowering Young Musicians through Co-Constructed Learning with Christina Gavin. I think I got that right. So, and then after that at 3 o'clock, we have Authentic Performance Assessment. So we're gonna go right into there because it's 2:30 and we're on time. I'm Rebecca Reynolds with the Digital Innovation Channel, and we're gonna click that video for 2:30 and get that going for you.
Hi, my name is Samantha Brooks, and I'm the visual arts teacher at No Middle School. And today I'm just going to be talking to you a little bit about agency in visual arts and how do we nurture student ownership while creating some good, authentic opportunities during NTI in the visual arts virtual classroom. So there's 3 main ways that I'm going to be talking about this. One is just incorporating community building in any way that you can. 2 is by giving students opportunities to express their feelings, their interest, or their perspective on the world through their artwork. And 3 is collaborating basically with anyone willing. So one of the ways that I feel like community building starts is the way that I started in my class. So I make sure that I greet every student by name that's coming into class. I also make sure that I'm doing like a fast check-in. So just throwing a question into the chat box. The other thing is just reminding students of the support that's available to them, both through myself, but also through the Youth Service Center, and just talking a little bit about the structure of the class. At the end of every class, I always try to leave a little bit of buffer time. So to answer questions, but also so students have a little bit of time to share out. And that's great, one, for the student and I to bond a little bit more, but it's also great because it allows some time for them to bond with their peers. The way that I've been structuring my live lessons is just really making sure that I'm trying to incorporate that structure, but also student choice, and really encouraging my students to ask questions. And I'm going to talk about a few different ways that I do that. I also think that that can really be supported by introducing new artists, processes, and even talking about how art history or current events are influencing the type of art and the subject matter of art that's being made. Moving through my lessons, one of the things that I have adapted in NTI is I've actually started separating lessons into steps in my assignments in Google Classroom. So each assignment in Google Classroom is actually a separate step within the lesson. And what I've found to be the benefit of that method is that I'm allowed to give more frequent and more specific feedback on the work that I'm getting in. It's also allowing my students and I to interact more frequently. And if there are any misconceptions, we're able to kind of curb that earlier on. So there's two main units that we just did recently that I'm going to use to kind of explain some of these things. So one is this community self-portrait that I did with my 7th graders. And one of the things that I really like to use is the Jamboard, which many of you are probably familiar with. And students are just able to click on a sticky note and type in a response. I obviously offer an opportunity for any students that want to give a verbal response, they can do so. But this was the start of this community self-portrait unit, in that I was wanting to find an artist that was a portrait artist. So this is an artist by the name of Amy Sherald, and she is a young, Black, female, contemporary painter, very relevant to the time. She had actually just completed a painting of Breonna Taylor that was in national news. And so there was a lot of different ways that we could talk about this artist. My first question to them, I kept pretty light. And this is usually how I do my Jamboards. And so just what are some of the characteristics of Amy Sherald's work? I had shown them a few pieces on a Google slide, and then I had this piece here in the Jamboard. And so you can see the responses there. When we moved on to the next slide in the Jamboard, I'm making the question a little bit deeper because students have kind of warmed up at that point. And so one of the things that came out as a response is noticing that Amy Sherald's subjects all have grayscale skin tone. So just asking them, like, why do you think that she uses grayscale? And what does that say to the viewer? And that allowed us to have an even deeper conversation of like, how would the message change if the skin tone was not in grayscale? So I really love using Jamboard for this method. And again, it's an opportunity for them to contribute to the class, but also to see everyone else's contributions to the class as well. For this community self-portrait, this is the way that the unit was kind of laid out. The first half of the unit was very technical. So these two pieces that you see were really focused on proportions of the face and creating the appearance of form through shading. But as we move to these last two pieces, this is where that student choice really, really kicks in. So for the back of these pieces, they learned how to use a variety of digital tools and were asked to create a background that gave a visual narrative about their community or about their hopes for their community. And so all of the student work looked entirely different because obviously the way that they view community, view their own communities, their hopes for their community, all of those are different dependent on each young artist. And so this was really fantastic because it allowed me to learn a lot about my students. It also, when we did a shared Google Slideshow to do a midpoint and a final critique, they were able to see one another's work as well and learn a little bit about their classmates. So again, just giving those really authentic opportunities to interact and build more of a sense of community. So there's a lot of different ways that I give feedback. One of the things that I also do at a midpoint and at a final point in a larger project is do something called a Better Your Work Time. And I offer these Better Your Work Times all the time, but I usually require that they come to one if they can when we reach a midpoint and when we reach a final point. And what I do is I basically set up a 1 hour block, and I make 3 different breakout rooms on a Google Meet, one for 6th, one for 7th grade, and one for 8th grade. And kids are able to pop in and get feedback. And they may just pop in for 5 minutes and get feedback from a peer and get feedback from me, or they may pop in and get feedback and then stay for the entire hour and get feedback again at the end of the hour. But I found that it's a really nice way for me to get to know my students more. It's also a fantastic way for them to actually better their work. And it's also an opportunity for them to interact again with one another. I obviously offer for my students to schedule an individual meet at any time. And I do have students that feel more comfortable doing that or really need that versus doing more of a group critique. One of the things that I use, though, for giving my students feedback that really has been a game changer is something called Moat. And so this is a Google extension that you can just search and add on. But I was spending a tremendous amount of time trying to give that good, specific and timely feedback. And what this does, so this was the first step in the community self-portrait. This is how a student would actually see it on the page, is they would just see this little play button, okay? And so when they click on that, they're actually able to hear my voice and hear the feedback that I'm given. Now, the only bummer about Moat is that you only can do 30-second clips. So for like this particular student, I had to do 4 different clips in order to get all the feedback that they needed. But I can tell you that I saved a lot of time by using this versus typing out all of the feedback that I needed to give them. The other nice thing is that they're hearing my voice. So again, that's that bonding, if you have students that English is not their first language or they're low-level readers, this is such a better and more effective way to give that feedback. And it's really so much closer to what we would be doing physically in the classroom, walking around and giving our students feedback. So when I get to a place where I'm actually doing a more formal midpoint and a final critique, I might do a quick check-in on the Jamboard to make sure that they remember what makes good feedback, right? So what are we supposed to be doing when we're doing a critique? And this is what it usually looks like for me. I will set up a slideshow that's a shared slideshow so all my students can edit on it. And I will put that link both in the Google Meet chat right at the start of class, but I will also put it in our classroom stream prior to class. And it will have a place for them to put their name and for them to put their piece. As class starts, we will review what makes a good critique. And we've talked about with my students, it's really important to identify something that's really successful in the work, using art language, something that needs improvement. And then if you're suggesting something specifically, how they can make those improvements. And so here to the right, you're seeing students responding and talking back and forth about the work. And so I always use this method both for my midpoint and for those final critiques. Again, this is a great way to make sure that my students are interacting and to build that sense of community. It's also an incredible way for me to assess my students because I can see what feedback was given. And what I typically do for this final one is if students do go back in and rework their piece in any way, I ask them to leave that original piece and add on the piece that they tweaked in some way here to the side. And so I'm able to really see whether or not they've been able to implement the feedback that I gave them and that their peers gave them. So another thing in terms of authentic opportunities is I think that collaboration is key. Why not tap into the strengths of your school community and the larger community? We have done several videos that have been a collaboration between my visual arts students and either band or chorus, then performing the sound, right, that's behind these art pieces. And those have been really amazing experiences, both for me and for my students. The cool thing about any kind of collaboration is that students are working towards something that's greater than just like turning in an assignment. It's also building that sense of community because they're able to see their peers' work and their peers' performances. And it even can engage parents and other community members by seeing that work and giving reflections on that work. And so I think all of it is a win in terms of forming those really authentic opportunities with our students. So one unit that we actually just finished up, I'm calling the Amplifier unit because it was a contest developed actually by the Amplifier Foundation. And so they developed this contest, and I decided basically to take the lesson that they developed for this, adapt it, and teach it to all of my kids. For my older students, some of them were actually able to ask their parents and submit for the contest. And for the project, they had to either take or collect 3 different photographs and do these text photo mashups to create an impact. And so the way that they started it was just by kind of developing what is a topic that's really important to me, and then creating these photo text mashups based on that topic. So we had topics, everything from environmental rights to women's rights to Black Lives Matter to LGBTQ plus rights. You name it, it was covered. And so again, the cool thing about this, just like in the community self-portrait, is that I'm really learning a lot about my students, about what matters to them, what they care about. I'm also demonstrating that they can have a voice with their artwork. Not just within our school community, but within, the larger community as well. And showing that art can be a form of activism. Again, with this project, I did the same thing that I showed you in the community self-portrait, where they were able to give one another feedback once they had developed what they thought was their final piece. When I do these collaborations, I usually just create a Google form in Google Classroom as their final assignment. And so they will go in and fill everything out and actually upload their work there. And I just place whoever I'm working with, so whatever colleague I'm collaborating with, I put them on the Google form as a collaborator. And that way they're able to access that work. So if you have any questions about anything I've gone over today, please feel free to contact me, and good luck in this NTI world.
All right, awesome. And then up next, we are going to watch Empowering Young Musicians.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Given, Director of Orchestras at Doss High School, and also 5th grade strings teacher at Norton Commons Elementary and Zachary Taylor Elementary. Today, I'm going to share some activities and strategies I have been using during NTI that will help empower my students through co-constructed learning. Getting instruments out to the students was very important to me in order to make sure that they could continue to perform and play their instrument during NTI. This slide shows a few of the students who were unable to get their original instrument or made choices to select a different instrument during this time. Since we were focusing on more individualized learning and differentiation this semester, I did give some of them the choices to select other options. So in these pictures, we have a student playing the violin who normally plays the bass, and a student playing the cello who also usually plays the string bass. And for performing and participating in classes in their homes right now, it was just not going to be possible for them to have such a large instrument in the home. So in order for these two students to continue to play, we selected a violin for this young man who had played the violin in the 5th and 6th grade. So he had a little bit of prior experience and was able to catch up quickly because he's a very good musician. And for this other young lady, we selected the cello. And for those of you who don't know, the string bass and the cello both read the same bass clef notation. So it was easy for her to read the notes and just slightly different on the position of playing the cello. For the young lady in the bottom picture, she actually is in the 9th grade and had come from a very successful middle school band program and just came to me at registration and communicated with me several times how much she really just wanted to learn how to play the violin and join the orchestra in high school. So since she had a very strong musical background and a lot of enthusiasm, we were able to get her into the orchestra this year and catch her up very quickly on some violin technique. One of the first lessons that we reviewed with all of my students in every grade is how to tune the instrument. When we're in person, it's so easy for a student to come up to me if their instrument's out of tune and they need a little bit of help. But when we're learning through Google Meet, it's much more difficult to get those instruments in tune. Sometimes the students are able to get it right away on their own, especially those that have previous experience. And sometimes I've had to arrange for private one-on-one Google Meets just to get the strings in tune. I am happy to report that all of my students in grades 5 through 12 have been able to tune their own instruments successfully. And we have only, out of about 65 total students, we have only had one broken string, and I think it was old and ready to break anyway. So now that everybody has an instrument and we know how to tune those instruments, you can imagine that we are still left with a wide variety of playing abilities, ranging from pure beginner to experienced musician on a new instrument, through experienced on a specific instrument for up to maybe 3, 4, 5, or even as many as 8 years for some of the students who started in our elementary programs in JCPS. So in moving forward with selecting music and activities for the students to play at home, I did also feel that it was important that our music students had something tangible that they could use at home, so they did not always have to refer to the Google Classroom or other digital media to get their music. So at registration, I did make large packets of music that included some rhythm exercises, some warm-ups, orchestral repertoire, solo pieces, and even some holiday tunes and things like that that they might find interest in. So the students did have paper copies as well as digital scans available in their Google Classroom to be able to access in whichever way worked best for them. In some of the first exercises, we started out by just isolating one skill at a time. So in the first classes, we worked on bowing technique and posture and position. And I ended up splitting my classes, my live classes, into 2 groups. Group 1 was for people who were beginners or people who thought that they would find some value in joining the beginner group, just to review basic notation and, like I said, how to hold the instrument, sort of some reminders and some review of things that they should have got in middle school. Now, for some of the beginners or for students who elected to come to the review time, they were also welcome to stay for the second portion of the class, which was more intermediate and advanced skills. So that way, students who were beginners could get some of that, startup technique and advice, as well as stay up to date on what they would need to do or what they could do with their peers who were at upper levels. This lesson shows the final product of some rhythm work that I did with all of the students. When it was first introduced, I only had the first line showing measures A, B, C, and D. And the reason we started with that is because quarter notes and eighth note patterns, along with quarter rest there in measure D, are some very basic rhythms that any student with music background in middle school or elementary program should have knowledge of. So I wanted to start with something that I knew everyone, beginner, intermediate, or advanced, would be able to participate in and understand fairly easily. So what we did with this rhythm was we clapped it, and then we also counted it using numbers. And for the students that weren't quite ready to use the numbers, like in this example, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I also introduced a way to count by using words with familiar words, actually seasonal familiar words that incorporated the appropriate number of syllables. So as you can see, for the ones who were ready, we did count using some advanced counting notation, but we also did it this way, where if there was a note with one sound, we said bat, and we clapped or played one beat, one note per beat. If there were two sounds on the beat, we said pumpkin. If there were four sounds on the beat, we said watermelon. And if there were 2/16 and an eighth note pattern, we said Halloween. The next thing that students were asked to do with this assignment is play it in a variety of ways, from the most basic level that they could play through the most advanced. So my beginner and transitional students could play a whole line at a time with just an open string. Next step would be to play that same rhythm, going as far as they can down this page with a D scale pattern. And for the students who could play that pretty easily with a D or G major scale pattern, I have introduced a chromatic scale that they could use to play these pitches and rhythms. Whoops. Anyway, you get the idea. So the students had to make choices about how they were going to practice these rhythms to demonstrate understanding of the counting as well as understanding of the desired scale. Through a review of some of these rhythms and how to count them in a variety of ways, most of the students were able to move on to practicing traditional orchestral repertoire. In this piece for violin called Velocity, the first couple of lines use rhythms that we had just reviewed in the pumpkin and bat segment of the rhythm assignment. So measure 1, we have 2 eighth notes, quarter note, followed by 2 eighth notes. So this first measure under the word allegro would be counted pumpkin, bat, bat, pumpkin. Second measure, bat, bat, pumpkin, pumpkin. This is really important for some of my students who really needed to review because they're in a transitional year or because they were switching instruments, because now they can focus on how to play these pitches on the instrument and what the fingerings are, rather than worrying about the rhythms. For those that can count it, 1 and 2, 3, 4, and, they are welcome to do so. So when I assigned these lessons in our Collabora platform, which is just video recording lessons and practice submissions, I made individual videos or group videos based on ability level, and the students were able to select which one they would record with based on their comfort level and their level of expertise. So for some of the students, they were able to play just one section at a time, with me playing their instrument and demonstrating these rhythms and pitches and giving a little bit of instruction in that Collabora environment on how to play a few lines at a time. For the ones who were ready to move on and play larger sections of this piece, they were given options to perform with their own instrument recording, as well as the recording of other instruments. For example, if I was a violist and I wanted to play along with the viola track, then that's what I would pick to play and practice along with. But once I feel like I'm accomplished on my part, I could also elect to play my part along with a violin or cello or bass line. So that way the students are getting an ensemble experience because they are hearing their own part and how it fits in with the parts of other people in the orchestra. They also had the option at all levels to play these sections at fast, medium, and even slow tempos for those that needed a jump start. So after several months of reviewing some performance techniques and other musical skills individually through private lessons and individual practice plans and goal setting and a variety of tempos and pieces and exercises designed just for each student to build up their playing ability one level at a time, we finally concluded that we were going to need to come up with some sort of virtual performance since we would still be online through the remainder of this first semester. So our students were able to pick from 5 or 6 pieces of seasonal music that were available in their packets and online. And once they settled on a piece that they really enjoyed, they were also able to pick a section of the music to record. And I put it together in a video compilation. This is just a screenshot of that video, but it turned out quite nice. The students did a great job of presenting themselves just as they would in a recital or a formal concert in school. And they were each able to pick a song that they enjoyed playing and were passionate about, as well as spend as much time as they needed to practice and record and get help with their individual parts in order to make this the best.
All right, Christina, I'm going to have to stop you there. I think we have our next session ready at 3 o'clock. I loved getting to see that process as you went through to their winter concert and having that student choice. So I'm going to see if some friends are here. They probably have been watching me. I realized my camera was on. But as they get settled in and ready to present, we're back with our schedule, and we are talking about authentic performance assessment. And we have a crew for our last session. We have Sarah Foreman, and I'm going to go through and have you guys introduce yourselves. I think this is Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
And we have, help me, Shanae.
Hello.
Awesome. Hi. We have Sandra. I think she's muted. We'll come back. Nicole with her beautiful Christmas tree. Love it.
Good afternoon. Yes, I decided to brighten up my meets a little bit with my little tree.
Perfect. And we have Kelsey.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, you look wild in your cheetah top. And we have Justin. He has his Christmas tree up too.
Oh yeah, we're ready.
And Dearica, I think her camera's off. So who is going to be driving today?
I'll share my screen, Rebecca.
Perfect. All right, guys, whenever you're ready, thanks so much for all being here. It's the end of a rainy day, and excited to see what you guys have in store.
All right. Well, thanks for having us on. When we heard that we were talking about authentic assessment, Dr. Sandra Hogue and I put our heads together and we said there's so many teachers that are doing assessments with their students that don't really feel like assessments, that feel like authentic, real work to the kids, that we ought to give we ought to make a way for those teachers to share their practice. So we're here with a panel of teachers who all are looking for ways to help their kids demonstrate what they can do in ways that are real and meaningful to their kids. So we've got just a couple questions to guide our conversation. Let me ask, are you seeing the screen I'm sharing correctly?
I am. Authentic assessment looks really nice and clean and green.
All right. And Sandra, you are muted or something. Check your...
She looks unmuted. She's talking, but we can't hear her.
Oh, no.
Maybe hang up and get back in.
Okay. So, in the meantime, while we wait for Dr. Hogue to come back, we'll go ahead and start with the first question. So, panelists, just stay unmuted and feel free to chime in and discuss what in your classroom makes an assessment authentic for your students.
Okay, well, we kind of felt like authentic assessment was an assessment where the kids weren't filling in the blanks and the students took ownership of the assessment. They're more applying the knowledge versus showing their knowledge of the content. So it's more application, and they're able to really take hold of it and make it their own.
I think for me, authentic assessment is an assessment that has relevance and value to the students' learning. And it's an assessment that allows them to just showcase what they know. They're able to make those personal connections to the content that they've been taught and show us what they learned from the instruction that we gave.
To me, authentic assessment gives them ownership. It gives them a little more investment in the activity and the learning.
And to me also, authentic to me also means that they're able to pull their strengths and use their strengths to show what they know. So if you have a student who's an artist or a student who's a good writer, they can use their strengths to really showcase what they've learned versus us telling them this is how you have to show us.
I love that somebody mentioned that authentic assessment it doesn't feel like an assessment. It's not the normal like fill in the blanks, multiple choice. It's something that the kids, they almost enjoy doing, but it also is a reflection and application of what they have learned in class. These are some artifacts that I've put up. Is it okay if I kind of talk about these? One thing that I have found during NTI is every kid is into YouTube and being like pretending that they are on their own YouTube channel or TikTok or whatever. And Flipgrid has become an awesome way to assess their knowledge. And so one thing that we've done is we created a choice menu for their reading, for their independent reading, and they can go in and they can showcase their illustration if they choose to talk about an illustration of the characters, or they can talk about the summary of the book they read, or do a book review. And just having them be able to kind of, like this little girl that did it, she like edited it and made it. It was very animated and it was very cute. But she also was showing what she knew about the story. So, and then I also put some poems on here because for EL, we have to do the students have to do a performance task at the end of every unit. And the unit that we are wrapping up is a poetry unit. And while it has a lot of those essential standards that we covered, the performance task of having them take what they know and what they learned about this poetry book that we read and apply it to their own life and write a poem that from something that inspires them in their life. And the ones that I pulled specifically were inspired by poems that were in this book that we read, and they did a really good job. And then tomorrow they're actually going to read their poems on Flipgrid. And so that's where the authentic assessment part also comes into. So those were just some things that we've done.
Doing a performance of your learning might help make it more authentic to the kids.
Yes, I agree.
I also hear in common, a lot of you mentioned giving the kids choice or giving them some sort of big role in the assessment, more than just a passive fill in the blanks thing. Does some of this have to do with sharing power with your students?
Absolutely. They need to take ownership.
Cool. All right, let's see. We heard a little bit about one authentic assessment, or a couple actually. Would anyone else like to share about an authentic assessment that you have done with your class during NTI this year? And we have a couple artifacts, so I'll show those screens first. Let us talk a bit about those, and then we'll just open it up for anyone to share.
And as Justin is doing that, I'm doing a sound check. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Hey, you're back. All right, then you're on the next question, Doc.
So this is one that we actually did. Kelsey and I collaborated on this one. So we had been studying fables and what goes with fables and the problem solution and everything. So what the students had to do was write their own fables, and then they could either write it, as you can see, or they could go on Flipgrid and verbally tell the story. We found that some students at that point in the year were still struggling with getting their ideas down on paper. So we used Flipgrid and had, found that we had success with that. And then the students took their fables and created a poster that represented their fables. So they were able to choose the animals, the lesson, and we had read a whole bunch of fables so that they were familiar with it. And then they took that and created their own.
Yes, and we had a checklist of everything that they needed to include in our fable. So it really helped us understand if they knew the parts of a fable and what makes a fable a fable. And so we have, like Sarah said, we have one student on the left who decided to write their story and did a poster for it below. And then on the right, we have another student who chose to do a Flipgrid, and she had a tiara on and she was a princess reporting, and she also made her picture below too. So it was really great to have them involved in reading their fables and their stories and giving them that choice.
We also had this evidence come from a classroom. Can we talk about this a bit?
Yes, so this is from my pre-K and kindergarten classroom. We were learning about Native Americans for the month of November. And our goal at the end of this unit was to understand how they interacted with their environment to survive. And so the students were like, "Ooh, Miss Rika, I love that TP." And so I started asking the kids questions, what would you like? They started telling me that, I wish I could make one of those things. And so it was like, okay, I'm listening to you guys. And I was like, well, what if you made your own Native American artifact? And it got them really excited because they were actually going to take what they learned and showcase how Native Americans interacted with their environment, like what materials did they use in their environment to show how they were able to survive. And that student in particular chose the woodland region, and she made her log house, a woodland longhouse, and then she created a video that she shared with the class. So everybody made a presentation. They all recorded themselves talking about the artifact that they made and stating, what materials they used in their environment to build whatever their artifact was and what it meant to them. Like, what was the purpose of this longhouse, or what was the purpose of the totem pole, whatever artifact they chose to make.
It looks like this is a social studies assessment, but I imagine you'd get a lot of evidence about the kids' abilities to do other sorts of skills too.
Yes, we also we did a lot of KWL charts throughout the instructions. We did them live, and so prior to even introducing this unit, we did a lot of KWL charts to, especially the K part, just to pre-assess our students. What do you know about Native Americans? I showed them various pictures and just them being, oh, those clothes, they look special. I don't think they wear them all the time. Like just the traditional garments that they wore for powwows, or just their garments that the students were never used to seeing before. So just exposing them to those different cultures. And this unit also helped us to pre-assess our students for our Holidays Around the World unit. And it also allowed us a space to understand that student voice and choice, because prior to starting our Holidays Around the World unit that we're in the middle of now, we were able to send out a survey a month in advance to ask the students, what holidays do you celebrate? What do you not celebrate? Do you feel comfortable sharing those ideas? What holidays would you like to learn about? And then the students also got to choose their summative assessment for this unit. So they're able to choose their choice of how they get to present their knowledge from this next unit that we're in.
It sounds like you're really bringing them.
Yeah, I love the way in each of these examples the students' voices are elevated. I think that's something we've gotten wrong in education for far too long. We viewed education as us opening the little heads of our kiddos and pouring in the things that we think are important. And so when you're into authentic assessment, though, what you do is turn up the volume on student voices so that they are able to shine and they are able to show what they know. So kudos to each of you. I'm getting goosebumps hearing from all of you so far. Justin, are we ready for the next question, or?
Is there anyone else who has one they'd like to share? Just something they want to talk about anecdotally in their classroom? If not,
I can share an example or a time that we use authentic assessment this past semester. So I teach 9th grade English, and we were focusing on argumentative writing. And my students student voice is so important and such a skill, that we want to sharpen through their education. And I want my students, they have opinions about social justice issues and just different stories and things that they want to share with people and get them to care about. So something that we were able to do in class was spend a little bit of time discussing these things and allowing the students to share their voice. And so that was a way that I could use the standards and the skills that the students have to learn and get them excited about it. Yeah, and take that ownership of learning these skills and applying them to the real world, applying them to their voice and their experience. Through, we did writing, of course, we had different frameworks and things, assignments that they had to do. But we spent some time using, with discussion and talking through some of those things, and I was able to assess the students' ability to hit those standards and showcase their skills in class. And it was a wonderful way. It was definitely refreshing and different for the students when it came to doing a unit on argumentative writing and speech.
It sounds like I'm hearing about formative and summative assessments being used very flexibly there.
Yeah, and that's prime example of, argument opinion writing is a beautiful space in which to elevate student voices, right? To turn up the volume. It's one of those unique things I think that we find in the standards, in that with you using argument with a compelling question, students can say opposite ends of an issue when it comes to answering that compelling question and still reach the same level of mastery of the content, right? So they feel heard and valued and celebrated while also meeting those standards that we need them to meet, right? I just love it when that happens. So we've heard from Shanae on this authentic assessment idea, and from Dorica. any of the others had any unique experiences for authentic assessment, especially during this NTI time? What successes have you found? Who wants to jump in?
I think for me, I had a learning curve with authentic assessment because I went through the struggle of, are the students capable of doing it through an NTI setting? And it was more of me being nervous about allowing the students to do it, because as teachers, we all know that we want to be there. We want to help students every step of the way. We want to be there to kind of support them, but we can't be there like we are in the classroom. So it was hard for me to let go and say, okay, let's try this. So our first one, which we're going to see here in a couple slides, was we had the kids create monsters for science to demonstrate different structures and functions. And I was a little nervous because I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. Were the students going to be able to complete the task at home? But it turned out great. And then I realized that, students are capable of more than we allow them to do. And I think, like I said, we all know as teachers, we want to be there, we want to support our students, but sometimes we have to let go and let them figure it out, and we have to let them experiment, and we have to let them, have a little bit of struggle. So seeing that it is successful, that was kind of a moment for me going, okay, this is possible through NTI. I don't have to be there to hold their hand every step of the way. And I've been a little more flexible, and I've been more willing, I guess, to use more authentic assessment, because I can see that students are capable of doing it. And again, that was just a learning curve for me, and being able to let go and allow the students to have that freedom of choice.
I think Sarah hit the nail on the head when you hear NTI, authentic assessments, and you're like, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to and we as teachers, it was a challenge at different times, but kind of going off this big poetry unit and finishing up, and I'm like, oh my goodness, how am I going to have a writer's workshop basically digitally? And I mean, it was digitally. It was not an easy thing, but having the kids have some choice in their poems and what they want to write about and stuff, just they took off with it, and it's been an amazing thing. It hasn't been, don't get me wrong, it hasn't been super easy because you have to meet with all the kids and work, and it gets to be a lot sometimes, but they have really taken to it and are so excited about what they are going to present and perform on that Flipgrid, and for the admin and stuff we're doing a big performance on Friday of all their poems, and so they've really bought in, because I feel like it was that authentic assessment and their voices coming through, and they were able to kind of do a little bit of that trial and error learning. Well, I want to write about this, but I'm not really coming up with anything, so let's try something else. And they were really able to explore that, which was an awesome thing.
Yeah, and just to build on that a little bit, I mean, this is also teaching them life skills. Like you said, they have to learn how to change direction if they don't have a good plan. They have to learn how to use the materials that they do have. The one that we showed a couple slides back where they had to create a poster, those were tech skills. They had to learn how to insert a picture and those types of things. So I think the authentic assessment kind of lends itself to more than just the content knowledge. It's also life skills.
Excellent. Anyone else want to add to that? One of the things I'm struck by is the connection between the overview session that we had this morning and the narratives that you guys are sharing now. There is definitely a continuum of student ownership in the education process. And, in that very first step, it really is directed. And the teacher feels like they hold the answer key, right? If back in the day, I have the answer key and there's only one right answer, and if they don't give it exactly in this way, it's incorrect. And in those instances, the student voice is turned all the way down, right? But on the other end of that continuum is student autonomy, where they are able to decide on what they want to learn, decide on how they're going to demonstrate what they've learned, and they decide on the best audience for that, right? And then there are spaces in between. And what I'm hearing in your examples is that some of us are just beginning to let loose of that idea that we hold the answer key, right? And we're folding in and realizing the importance of turning up the volume on the student voice in the assessment process. So kudos to you, no matter where you are on that continuum. What we asked this morning is that we move a bit further towards student autonomy in the education process. That it's about them. It isn't about us holding all things that are true and great in education. It's about elevating their voice and choice and their critical thinking skills. And so kudos to you. Justin, can we go to the next question? Okay, so how does authenticity affect engagement, student ownership of work, or other parts of student experiences? Why does it matter? That's what that question says to me. Why does it matter, and how does it impact our students?
I think it definitely makes them more engaged. We're all in agreement of that. And I think it makes it more memorable for them. You know, that's something that they got to do or produce or make or create. And I don't know about you all, but for me, if I fill in a multiple choice test, I forget it the minute I'm done with it. Forget that knowledge. So this is maybe an opportunity to learn those things and have those ideas stick with them a little more.
I definitely think it increases that engagement, and it also, I think, offers opportunities for students to shine in different ways. Like you're taking a multiple choice test. Oh, you don't know the knowledge, then okay, then they think, oh, I'm not very good at this. But if you give them an authentic assessment, there can be so many different components where that student can really shine and really show. Maybe they love art, and maybe it's an authentic assessment that has a lot of art involvement, and they can choose to showcase that, and that will they will buy in a whole lot more. I feel like if they feel like, oh, I'm good at this, I can show, I might not be great at one component of it, but I'm really good at this, so I can work that in there. So it's just, I think it just builds confidence in our more in our struggling learners a little bit, and where they can showcase different things that they are strong at as well.
I'd have to agree with you, Nicole, on that. And then also, I think that when we create authentic assessments and we allow that student voice and choice to be seen, we create a space where we're no longer looking at our students through a lens of deficit. Oftentimes, those multiple choice tests, they put our students in a box. They don't allow each and every student to truly show what they know. It just wants us, it just wants them to express what is on that paper, not what they have learned and the connections that they have made to it. Whereas when we give them authentic assessments, it tells us more about our students, the way that they construct meaning, how they understand what they've been taught, and it allows them to show us what they know in a way that they're comfortable with showing it. Because I know that growing up, I had test anxiety. Like for me, multiple choice tests, like we don't think about that when we're giving students assessments. Like some students really truly get anxious. Like I had kindergartners last year that cried over the map test. And I knew the student was an awesome reader, like she was really, really high, but her map test made it look like she did not know much of anything. And for me, like I struggled with that using those assessments, because sometimes those assessments, like they truly show the bias of our curriculum. They don't allow for our students to truly be seen in what they can do, what they know in the various ways. It's just like, this is the only way. And with authentic assessment, we give our students multiple ways to show what they know and how they know it.
And so I put up the last question because Ms. Mack, I think, has a lovely segue. How else can authentic assessments help us fight against the inequitable experiences of kids in classrooms and the problems caused by dads or biased sorts of assessments?
I feel like we've really talked about this, and that, we're allowing students to showcase themselves in ways that we never have before. We're allowing them to work to their strengths. I mean, I worked with students who are struggling readers who would say, I can't do it, I can't do it. But then they're great artists. So I would say, draw me a picture, show me what you know. And all of a sudden that student shined and their whole mindset changed. They went from a student who was not participating in class to all of a sudden they're raising their hands. They're sharing their drawings in front of the class. They're showing other students. Students who otherwise would just sit in the back of the room and not say anything are now shining because they're finding their strengths and they're able to show what they know in a way that's comfortable to them. And, we're not leaving students out anymore. Sometimes those multiple choice tests and just doing it one way, we're leaving students behind. But when we find those strengths and we showcase those strengths, we're not leaving those students out anymore. We're allowing them to come more into the classroom, and we're raising their comfort level as well. And, they want to participate more in the class now that they're able to do so. They've found a way. They've kind of found their voice, and it may not be in the traditional way, but they're finding their voice and they're showing what they know. And it's funny because I had one student and then all of a sudden I had another student. And I found that once that other student showed what they were knowing, then the other student's like, oh, well, I can do this too. And it kind of set off a domino effect where I had more student participation because everyone saw that they could, show what they know in their own way.
Yeah, and just to build on that a little bit, I mean, it creates that safe space where, they're allowed to experiment. They're developing that love of learning, really, because multiple choice tests all the time, make kids resentful. And I think this is a great space to help them feel safe, take risks, try new things, develop their strengths, find out what they still need to work on. And so I agree with you, Sarah, that it can definitely be a great thing.
Cool. Sandra, I don't know about you, but I learned a lot.
I learned a great deal, and I always love hearing the narratives from our teachers. There are just such amazing things happening across JCPS. So every chance I get to listen to the reasoning of our teachers and the whys behind the what, there's just so much brilliance, right? So much collective cognitive power in the district. So it makes me excited. So thank you, guys. So we, once again, and we're going to pitch it back here to Rebecca to close us out. But once again, what we love about hearing from you is that there are many places to be standing on that continuum I mentioned before, right? We want students to own their educational process, and I am thrilled that as a nation, we've come to this aha. I think it took me longer than it should have taken me, but to realize the power of elevating student voices in the education process and the power behind that. We have kids who resist and fight and toss rooms and do that kind of thing more than we'd like, but it's oftentimes those kids who don't feel heard and don't feel valued in the classroom. And so authentic assessment and authentic work are powerful ways to ensure our kids feel heard and seen in the space that isn't our classroom as the teacher, it's our classroom as a learning community. So having said that, Rebecca, I'll pitch it back to you with a hearty thank you to each of you for being part of this session today.
Thank you, Dr. Hogue. I think you said everything I wanted to say. It was so hard not to like chime in and be like, yes, I was doing the agree sign. I had to turn off my camera. But I'm so thankful to be able to sit in on like this little mini PLC powwow with all these great teachers. So it's so great to have all of you. And this episode is going to be on demand for each of you to share and get some recognition for your hard work of being here and being vulnerable, because it's hard to put your face out there. So great job, and I hope you guys all have a great holiday break. I'm just going to close it out and show everyone our schedule. So if you go to the bottom of our schedule, on the virtual professional learning schedule, there are the February and January tabs. Now, there's nothing there yet, but I heard we might be having some Jan Richardson time, and my good friend Matt said it's going to be a January, and I thought that was pretty funny. But we're going to get that populated, and we're going to have the same schedule Wednesdays in January and February. Same time, same place, and it looks like we already have a Girls Who Code happening with Debbie Unger and her team. So I love Jim is already getting his wife in there to do a session. So I'm excited for that one. I'll go back to my face, but thanks everyone for being here today and dealing with our tech issues. Enjoy your holiday break, and thanks